to introduce. I'm going to go ahead. The Kitchener Youth Action Council works in collaboration with the City of Kitchener Community Services Department. We act as a positive, influential, and energetic voice, raising awareness and organizing positive youth action within our community to address youth issues. In addition to the yearly actions that are 3 subgroups, Youth Awards, special events, and youth issues who have been involved in planning and implementing events such as Youth Awards, Pride Prom, TEDx salons, and speaking at City Council meetings on issues regarding budget cuts and gambling. Kayak also gives valuable inputs on matters relating to the needs and concerns of youth, the effectiveness of existing products, of existing programs, not products, and the establishment of new programs for youth. So this year, Kayak welcomed to their meeting a variety of groups, organizations, and initiatives that were interested in our advice and assistance. These included the Kirabil Princess Project, student from Conestoga College Recreation and Leisure Program, Young Cares Projects of Waterloo Region, Youth Forum 2013 Planning Committee, and the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council. Our inputs to these groups were just as eclectic as our council's demographics. This year, Kayak had members from 8 different high schools, 3 different post-secondary institutions, and youth who are no longer in school. The 33 1.5-hour meetings that we had this year were attended by 20 members on average for a total of 1,005.5 hours. The 0.5 is very important. This included the extra time that was spent outside the meetings as well. So keep in mind these are absolute value figures. They're not comparable to last year's because we didn't have any of that.
Kayak believes that the many civic initiatives that we have taken on this year have really had a positive impact on the community as a whole and especially on the youth. We are happily giving you this tree as a symbol of our presence in the City of Kitchener and as a reminder to incorporate youth perspectives into your daily decision making. Much like its ever-growing roots into the nourishing soul, youth have been establishing great connection with the city and its staff, and we hope to continue to do so for the years to come. The ornaments all around the tree are an extension of our council in that they represent the voices of our members who are reminiscing on their experience with Kayak and what it means to them. We hope that wherever this tree goes, it will serve to remind you of our presence and our importance for the future of our great city, Kitchener. Thank you.
And we also left Bravo cards for all of you guys. Some of you already opened them up, so go ahead and open up the rest of them whenever you have time. But that was basically it, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and I believe there was supposed to be the mayor and myself for a quick photo op with you guys in the tree. So thank you for all the work that you guys do from Kayak on behalf of the city.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Where's Kelly? Come on. Did you see the tree yet? Oh, yeah. That's great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'll just start from here. Thanks to Kayak for everything that you do, and the staff and the support staff does a lot for the city. As I make my way back to the chair, I'm going to just, I guess I have to turn your mic on, so I can't do that.
We can roll it that way.
Should have thought of that beforehand. But Ms. Houston's asked to make an introduction before we get started.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. I'm very pleased to present a new member to the INS department, Mr. Justin Reedman, who's on the far side of the horseshoe, is our new Director of Transportation Services. Justin started with us on July the 2nd, and we've already arranged a number of informal meetings with members of council over the next few weeks, so there'll be an opportunity for you to chat further with Justin about some of your issues and concerns with transportation services. We have quite a heavy agenda on transportation services items today. So since this is Justin's first meeting, we are allowing him to observe his first meeting rather than throw him into the deep end of the pool. So please welcome Justin Reedman to our staff.
Welcome, Justin. Happy to have you here. All right, so we will start with the consent items. So there's 6 items there. I think Councillor Glenn Graham, you said you would move those. Are there any questions on any of the consent items? Councillor Verbanovich?
No, not on that, sorry.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez?
Yes, thank you. Just reviewing the concerns around the Jean Steckel School and knowing the area very well. I certainly support the idea of having a crossing guard there. There's no way those kids would cross that 4-lane Huron Road safely without somebody. But I guess my concern continues to be that there's a school, JW Girth, has been asking and asking and asking for a crossing guard. We're now going into an over-expenditure for this school, notwithstanding the fact that it is important. I really, maybe somebody can help me understand how this got sort of bumped out of the queue.
Mr. Sherman?
Through the chair, JW Girth is located on a minor collector road, and we've been doing studies over the last several years to see if a crossing guard is warranted there. And because the road doesn't really lead anywhere yet, there is no real appreciable traffic outside of the school-related traffic itself. And actually, the new school, Steckel School, is very similar, and there is no crossing guards at this particular time warranted in front of the school on Woodbine or on Parkvale, because they are similar roads, whereas Huron Road is an arterial roadway carrying high speed and a much higher volume of traffic, is a 4-lane arterial, and is a completely different situation. And that is why we've warranted, or we've recommended the crossing guard on Huron Road.
Okay, and I said that I understand about the Huron Road issue. The road in front of JW Girth School does go somewhere. It is also a bus transportation route. It has serious parking issues all the time, and I really think that we need to look at something more. And I will be addressing this with staff offline, because there was another email from a resident about these issues. So, thank you.
Councillor Singh?
It's not a question, just wanted to pass on the invitation for item number 2, McKinnon Park, Cinema Under the Stars. So it is taking place on September the 7th, and for some of the delegations, if you're interested, coming out and seeing an outdoor movie, we're playing Despicable Me. So that's all.
Thank you. I just have a quick question on number 6 as well, with the school crossing. Are we going to be, I see that there's installation for the school crossing and no stopping signs in front of the school, but is there going to also be signs on Huron Road advising that there's school crossing and a crossing guard ahead, because of how fast people do travel on that road? I think they need the warning as well.
As we are mandated from the Ontario Traffic Manual, there will be the appropriate school crossing signs. There'll be the crossing ahead signs, as well as the school crossing signs, and the pedestrian painted lines as well across the roadway, as you see at any uncontrolled adult crossing location. We don't put the signs in locations where we have traffic signals or stop signs. We are only able to put the signs in where it is an uncontrolled crossing. This will have those signs.
Okay, perfect. I just didn't see it there. I wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you. So that has been moved. All the consent items have been moved. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're now going to move to number 7, which is the Morrison Road traffic calming. I'm going to turn it over to staff first, because there has been a revised recommendation. So we'll hear from them, and then we have some delegations. Mr. Carmichael?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. The staff have executed a traffic calming review for Morrison Road as a result of recommendations from a council report in early 2012. We initiated the review in March of 2012, have held 2 public information centers with the residents of Morrison Road. Through these meetings with the residents and the input we received from them, and the work that the project team have done on it, based on the input we received from the local residents, The recommendations that you see in the report are what have come out of the final, the recommendations you see in the report includes 3 speed humps to be installed on Morrison Road between Grand River Boulevard and Sims Estate Drive, that a raised crosswalk be installed on Morrison Road in the area of the trail crossing between Grand River and Quinte. That's very close to the vehicular access to the old Chicopee ski hill. There's a trail connection there, so it's an excellent location for a raised crosswalk. And the final recommendation in the original report included a roadway improvement to be installed at the corner of Morrison Road near the addresses 75 to 80. This is the sharp 90-degree curve of Morrison Road down by the Freeport Hospital, the rear end of the Freeport Hospital. Since the original recommendations came out and the report was finalized, a number of residents identified concerns with that proposed roadway improvement down at the bottom of Morrison Road. As a result, staff and Councillor Abanovic, the ward councillor, met with a number of residents last week on Wednesday afternoon. There's approximately 10 residents that met with us who had raised concerns about our proposed roadway improvement down at the corner. In meeting on site, we went over the issues. We explained our reasoning for the original recommendation. The residents outlined their concerns and thoughts and suggestions for an alternate control or alternate design at that location. Long story short, from that, both staff, I should say all of staff, councillor, and the residents that were in attendance at this on-site meeting agreed to revise the recommended design at the bottom of Morrison Road. Mr. Reedman beside me would have sent you an email late last week to all members of council outlining the changes to that recommended roadway improvement, and hopefully you have that plan in front of you. But to summarize it, we're no longer recommending tightening up the radius of the curve or adding in extra curbing through the curve anyways, and we're now proposing that sidewalks be added on both sides of Morrison Road. On the north side of Morrison Road, on the frontage of 3 homes, that would provide access from, I believe it's Manor Drive, where we could cross, and the residents or the pedestrians could walk down those sidewalks and gain access to the rear end of Grand River Hospital. There's been a significant demonstration of pedestrian traffic coming from the hospital to and from, going easterly or northerly here, as you see. So we feel that this additional sidewalk will be a great support to that pedestrian pattern in the area. We have talked with 2 of the 3 residents that would be directly impacted by this new sidewalk. Both residents have indicated support for the sidewalk or no concerns. In addition, we are recommending a sidewalk be extended on the south side or on the inside of the curve down to the location where the current GRT bus stop is, and also to add a raised crosswalk at this location. What this will do, there's a few benefits to it, is it will take residents away from the actual corner of the curve and allow anybody going down to the bus stop to cross directly to the bus stop using the raised crosswalk. Importantly, the raised crosswalk, which has a speed hump designed into it, will slow the traffic down coming up from King Street. One of the main concerns identified by the local residents was the speed of the vehicles coming up from King into this curve. We feel, from a staff perspective, the implementation of this raised crosswalk will certainly go a long way to address the speeds coming into that curve, and along with the sidewalks that we are proposing, will go a long way to improving the pedestrian crossing locations in the area. It's important to note that we are proposing to also block off the current sidewalk connection and opening in the guide rail that promotes crossing right at the corner there. We wanted to obviously discourage that. So from that meeting, there was general consensus from the meeting from the residents we met with on site. We have since forwarded this information to GRT for their information to let them know of a change in the proposal. Have not heard anything from them. So as a result, the recommendations in the report are changed as per the email that would have been sent to all members of council.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any questions or after the delegations have spoken.
Thanks. I was just wondering if, because you did a lot of describing there, if we can, Colin, would we be able to get a copy of this put up? You can use my copy and put it up just so that everyone can use the same. It's the map that's attached to the email. We will go to delegations first. Up first, we have Roger. Welcome, Roger. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you. My name is Roger Lubaya. I'm the resident of 75 Morrison Road. As Ken had just mentioned, last week our Councilman Barry Bernovic and Ken Carmichael have convened a meeting to address the concern of that area's residents. And after a discussion, we all came to consensus that the plan Ken just described, and we all agree to that. So therefore, we don't have any more concern. I have nothing else to add.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in. Does anyone have any questions for Roger? Don't see any? Nope. Nope. You're good. Thank you. Up next, we have Dan. Dan Graham.
Madam Chair, councillors, staff, and visitors. I represent a group of Chicopee residents. Some of them are, there's 12 of us here today, I believe. And our concern is against the 3 speed bumps and the raised crosswalk on Morrison Road for 3 real reasons. First of all, safety is our main concern. Secondly, the cost is a concern. And thirdly, the disruption to the neighborhood residents and also the Chicopee Ski Hill, which has been part of our community longer than our houses have been there. In regards to safety, I know you're all well aware of the concerns of emergency services, the fire department, ambulances, etc. So I won't go into that. Also, Grand River Transit has an issue with speed bumps. From reading staff's report, this seems to be more of a volume issue than a speed problem, and respectfully, we disagree that speed humps are a solution for volume issues. Morrison Road has always been a main artery. Certainly, while our houses were cornfields, Morrison Road was is the main artery through Chicopee. And I think people that bought on Morrison Road knew they were buying on a main artery. And that's, you know, when you're on a busy street and it's busy, that's just the way it is. As far as the speed, staff reported at the first of 2 meetings that we had at Eric Hoffman School that they did have Waterloo Regional Police do 45 hours of speed enforcement on Morrison, and I believe that was in the parking lot of the old parking lot of the ski hill near Quinte there. And during the 45 hours, they had 2 infractions of drivers driving 60 kilometers an hour. So that clearly shows that speed isn't an issue. I believe, I don't have the numbers here with me, but they also confirmed that the rate of accidents was low on that stretch. So again, it comes down to volume. Our big issue with Morrison Road, as it's a safety for the entire community, which we're part of, are the parking around the curve, especially during soccer season. We know a lot of that. It's great having the soccer fields in the backyard. It's great to have the kids have a safe place to play, but it's getting them to that safe place to play that can be a difficulty when the parents are forced to park on that road. Sometimes when they cross the road and they're so excited to get over to the soccer fields, those little ones can dart out between the cars. And it's very dangerous driving through there. For a period of time, parents were parking on the grass property, which is now owned by the Ontario French School Board. And then they were ticketed for parking there and had to go back to parking on the street. In my discussions with the French School Board, they seemed quite happy to allow there to be a temporary parking spot there until they're able to put a shovel in the ground, which they said would be a minimum of 3 years and could be longer. Of course, their issue is funding. We also felt that that more of the neighborhood should have been surveyed other than Morrison Road, with it being a main artery. Only the people on Morrison Road were surveyed, and although the minimum numbers for answering back and for voting yes were achieved, they were very low. It needed 50% to respond, and I think they had 51 point something percent respond, and 57, and I believe they needed 60% yes, and it was only 68% yes, and it was and on a low number to begin with. That's an exceptionally low number. So I think from that you can deduce that the majority of the folks on Morrison Road don't believe speed bumps are an answer either. And again, we really feel this is a volume issue. If, however, the city feels that speed is an issue and they wish to control it, other ways to do it would be to put in we certainly don't mind, I mean, putting a crosswalk from the park, where the trail goes, is understandable. Making it a raised crosswalk makes no sense at all. The crosswalks where you narrow this, where you bring the sidewalk on into the road a bit, so that there's a smaller pathway there, is a common way of slowing traffic down through a crosswalk without putting in a hump, which would work and come up with the same effect.
Dan, if you could just start wrapping up, I'd
Yep.
give you extra time.
And
already.
also, we would recommend that, if possible, the city would look at adding three-way stops at Morrison and Quinte, and at the other Morrison and Grand River, a three-way stop there as well. There's already a four-way stop. If speed's an issue, those are two things that could be looked at. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. There may be questions for you. I believe there is. Councillor Vrabanovich.
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for coming in, Dan. Just want to ask a couple questions in terms of yourself and the folks that are with you here tonight, or this afternoon rather. Are all of you within the circulation area, or some of you beyond the circulation area?
By circulation area, you mean
the area that was surveyed?
No,
Sorry.
none of us are in the area that was surveyed, because staff told us when we asked Mr. Carmichael at that first meeting, if we would be surveyed, and we were told we wouldn't be, because in his words, I believe it was that it didn't directly affect us because we didn't live on the street. However, we can't get home without going that way. So it does affect us, and that's another issue I think that might want to be looked at as you move on, that affected people other than people that live on the street that use it every day.
Right, and that may be something that we want to look at in the future in terms of our process around these, because right now they do just survey the folks that are most directly affected, that have their properties abutting it.
Certainly, that would help greatly.
When you talk about when you talk about a crosswalk, are you familiar with the one on Morgan Ave in front of
Yes,
Howard
the school,
Robertson
yes.
and the community center? Is
Oh.
that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay, because that one actually does cut in, but it's also raised.
that one is also raised, but I have seen them as well, that they're just cut in and they're not raised.
Okay.
And I think the one in front of Howard Robertson, by the way, it is raised, but it's a gradual raise, and it's quite a long. The crosswalk is quite wide there. So again, that's not as bad as an actual speed bump.
Okay. And that's all the questions I have for you, and then I have a question for staff. Thanks.
Okay, there's more questions. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you for coming in and making your presentation. Can I just get a sense of where you and your group that are represented here live?
Most of us here today live on Wyandotte Court, which directly backs on to the field where the soccer fields are, okay, right in front of where the school is going to be. And,
okay.
And Councillor Brvanovic is going to show you where we are.
Okay.
That's Wyandotte Court. We've also talked to, we also have in our group of people that we've been dealing with on Manitoulin and Quinte, and actually some of the residents on Morrison are people that are in our group as well. So it's not just Wyandotte Court.
Okay, so you do have a good cross-section of residents. 'Cause if I was sort of thinking, well, Wyandotte Court would only be impacted by one traffic calming measure depending on which direction you're coming from. Okay. In your opening statements, you talked about the impact of Chicopee Ski Hill. You didn't talk about that further in your comments, so I wondered...
No, I didn't. What I meant by that is, again, the ski hill was there when my house was a cornfield, and I think having speed bumps is going to affect their business. I mean, it's tough enough for them, I think, to make that go, and it's a great benefit to the neighborhood. Winter and summer, they've really done a lot, and we'd hate to see that impact their business. And that's why we added that in. And I don't think they were consulted on this either, because when I did talk to the general manager after the first meeting, he wasn't aware that there was a meeting. He wasn't. Okay. And they are on Morrison Road.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. Yeah, I'm familiar. I'm quite familiar. I grew up in that area for a while. I just find it an interesting correlation between traffic calming and business impact. I don't know that there's some interesting correlation there. I was interested to hear, though, you said that the regional police had spent 45 hours. Did you say?
That's my understanding from what we can recall. I did contact Danny to get the actual details, but by the time he emailed me back a chart,
okay,
I was on my BlackBerry and
okay,
the old eyes
because that surprised me that there was only 2 infractions, because there's a lot of quick traffic coming up from Old King up Morrison and around that bend past the hospital. So I'm quite surprised
that bend. And by the way, until we see that recommendation, we didn't know about the crosswalk speed bump down in that end. So we really don't know enough about it to comment. But personally speaking, on my first hearing, that makes sense. I mean, if there was any place where there should be speed control, it's on that curve, because obviously, living in that neighborhood, going out to Old King Street, we travel that way quite frequently, and certainly something there I think would be warranted. So again, we need to have I think the group needs to have a look at it before I speak for anybody else, but I kind of understand that and think that might be a good idea.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Councillor Unetsky.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions have already been asked, but maybe just to finish off the one that I have. Are you representing just yourself or a number of neighbors here?
No, I would say probably 45 households, and again, we have 12 represented here today.
The 12 that are here?
Yeah.
Right there? Okay.
Yeah.
And in opposition to the traffic calming,
right.
Basically. Yeah. Okay, and I do remember your comments that when Morrison Road was an old rural road and just a handful of houses on the east side of Morrison, now all those lines are still farm fields.
Right.
Of course, the traffic was much different in those days as opposed to is now. So, yeah, I think things have changed, but the hill is still there and serves its function. So thank you for your comments.
You're very welcome.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I wasn't paying close enough attention, but you don't think speeding is a problem?
I've lived in that neighborhood for 28 years. I don't think speeding is a problem. We've got many long-term residents, and believe me, if speeding was a problem, we'd want it addressed too, because our kids and now I'm embarrassed to say, our grandkids plan that area when they're here, and if speeding was a problem, it would be something we would be concerned about as well. What is an issue I can understand for the residents is the volume. There is more volume now, especially since the Sims Estate properties have gone in. But if that is an issue, speed bumps aren't the way to handle it, in our view. And Councillor Gazzola, you'll appreciate the amount of money involved in the cost of these. And besides being residents, we're also all taxpayers. And so we want to be mindful of money spent if it's not needed.
Can you expand on what you don't like about the speed humps, other than they do cost a lot of money? Like you said it.
Number one is safety. We've talked to the fire department, the paramedics, and I know they've addressed you folks before, and that's why I didn't go into great detail. You know their view. Grand River Transit, and believe me, when you live in Chicopee and you have teenage kids that live in Chicopee, and they want to get anywhere without having a driver's license, Grand River Transit is a necessary part of getting around. And of course, as we're all trying to be greener, and with the region coming up with the brilliant LRT that they've come up with, and the emphasis on public transportation, we would like to see our transit in Chicopee increase, not decrease. And although I've spoken to Grand River Transit a number of times, and although they haven't said they would look at decreasing traffic, bus service to the area, I was told directly that increasing the bus traffic there, and they pointed out Morgan Avenue as an example of a problem that they have that's close to our neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question of staff when we get to that point.
Okay.
That's all the questions for you, Dan. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
So we do have questions of staff. Councillor Verbanovich, you're first.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you, Mr. Carmichael. Just first of all, in terms of the number of hours of enforcement that Mr. Graham raised, can you touch on that and what those stats were, and maybe why you speculate they are what they are?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The delegate is referring to our selective traffic enforcement program that we work very closely with the Waterloo Regional Police on. And in beginning of April to the end of June of 2012, Morrison Road was identified and earmarked for enforcement during that 3-month period. During that 3-month period, the results we received back from, I should point out that the results that we have are only as of the end of May. Up until just in the last few weeks, quite frankly, the police had only provided us with the enforcement results for the first 2 months of the 3-month period that the enforcement was out there. So those numbers are actually for 2 months of time, where, as mentioned, 45 hours of enforcement were dedicated to Morrison and only 2 speeding charges were laid. I won't bore you with details of other locations that were done during that same time period, but the low number of speeding charges is not unusual in comparison to the number of times out there. It all depends on when they're out there, who's out there, what tolerance level they have when they're enforcing, and so on and so forth. Obviously, we're disappointed. Well, we're happy that there weren't more speeding charges, but we suspected that there would be more based on the speeding studies that we have done.
Okay, and I'm wondering if you can touch on the suggestions that Mr. Graham has raised, the crosswalk without the raised portion, and also the notion of some three-way stops potentially.
Through you, the Chair, in regards to all-way stops, at both public meetings, the question always comes up. It's certainly a common question we get from the public, just put a stop sign in to control speeds. Our response to that from a staff perspective is the first item in our Ontario Traffic Manual for the use of the proper use of stop signs is not as a speed control device. We share that desire. Problem with implementing stop signs where they're not warranted is drivers are not uneducated on how on roads operate, and then when they quickly discover that there's not a lot of side street traffic, they end up abusing that main street stop sign. And that's where our concerns come in, and it's not just held by the City of Kitchener, it's held North America-wide by the traffic engineering field, that people start either rolling through stops, blowing through stops, squealing their tires, speeding up between stops to make up for the time that they just unnecessarily were delayed. So we strongly oppose putting in stop signs for speed control. The question about the raised crosswalk, the speed hump design that we use within a raised crosswalk is exactly the same design we use for our speed humps on other roadways. And these speed humps that we use are a design that has been a result of a meeting we did a number of years ago that included GRT, fire, operations, ambulance, police. Well, obviously these groups would rather not have any hindrance whatsoever in responding to their calls, which I appreciate. They did appreciate the redesign we did of these humps and felt that they were, at that point in time, what they were preparing to accept going forward. As has been identified, fire have clearly identified their opposition to vertical deflections in pretty much every traffic calming report we do, and GRT has just recently identified concerns with vertical deflections on any of our traffic calming locations, any of their transit routes. Our response to that is we are currently working on revising the traffic calming policy. We're fully aware of these concerns and the impacts, and we'll be working with these groups along with others to develop a new policy that will be cognizant of that concern and come to hopefully a solution that is acceptable to every stakeholder involved.
Okay. The next question I have is Mr. Graham's suggestion of engaging in the voting, I guess, by broader groups of people other than those directly affected. This isn't the first time we've heard that in some neighborhoods, and I'm wondering, what that guideline in the process is based on. I mean, is it something that we've just come up with here in the city of Kitchener? Is it a best practice in terms of how traffic calming consultations are done in other communities as well?
Through the chair, in response to that question, it's a valid one, and it is a question that has commonly come up. And I can appreciate the residents that are forced to drive that road. They're going to be impacted. There's no question about it. Our position on it is it's always a challenge, and there's probably no clear answer. First and foremost, we're going to be dealing with the whole resident aspect of the policy through our review of the policy. So what comes recommended out of the new policy, I don't know at this point, but we will be certainly taking a very close look on resident input. But our position right now is the people that live on the street that we're putting the measures in on are the residents that have to get in and out of their driveways. It's their children playing in the front yards. It's their house that is directly exposed to the traffic conditions on that roadway. Well, I appreciate that the residents living on the side streets have to drive that roadway. I would suggest it's a public roadway, and it would be very difficult for us to pinpoint where we cut that line off, where we involve residents on inputting on the plan. And just speaking from experience and input I've received from the dozens of reviews we've gotten into now, is the one common element is the people who live on the street are the ones that support the speed humps and support slowing the traffic down. It's the residents that live on the side streets that are forced to ride the road that don't support the speed humps. For whatever reasons, that's up to those residents that are raising those concerns.
That's sort of your experience from other studies?
That's been a very common input that we've gotten through all our reviews, yes.
Okay. And in this particular instance, or in fact in the instance of all of our traffic calming studies that we do, I mean, streets get on a list somehow, and they're rated, and ultimately they end up being considered for traffic calming. Wondering if you could just talk about that process so everyone's aware of it, like how something gets on the list, how it's rated, and then how we end up considering them here.
Since we approved our policy back in 2004, and we put a few measures in through our first reviews, it's become a very, very popular item for our residents. So we get a significant number of requests for traffic calming. Speeding is probably easiest our biggest challenge to address. When we get a request for traffic calming, our staff will follow up with a number of studies. We'll measure the volumes, we'll measure the speeds, we'll assess the collision experience. We'll do field investigations to determine what other amenities are provided in the other area, whether it's sidewalks, parks, schools, trail connections, so on and so forth. And also we have to assess the impact on emergency service response. Those 5 factors are what are applied to a priority listing that we have developed based on the actual conditions in the roadway. So the worse your speeding is, the higher your volumes, the more collisions you have, the less sidewalks you have, the more impact on emergency response, or I should say the less impact, then the higher your score will be to justify putting in traffic calming measures. So that priority ranking allows us to exactly do that, prioritize the locations that have been requested. For the council's, for committee's information, we probably have over 150 roadways that have been requested for traffic calming, and we have budget support to execute 4 reviews per year.
Okay.
So that's how we assess and prioritize locations, and obviously each year we present you, members of the committee and council, to approve our recommended locations.
Okay, and just to be clear, it's not, simply the fact, one or two residents raising a concern or a ward councillor raising a concern that gets a street on the list to be considered. It's a whole variety of factors, as you indicated, that get rated, and then pretty much becomes a numbers game then.
That's correct. And in our mind, that's the best way to do it, is to let the actual conditions dictate what locations should be chosen. In other words, the conditions should dictate what problems are being experienced out there, and if the conditions show there's more problems in other locations, then that should be addressed beforehand, and that's how we prioritize.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, a number of questions have been answered. Really going to the, I know the process you go through, and we have a big long list. We can never satisfy the list. How did this get to the top? What can you just just remind me of a few problems that brought this to the top of the list?
Through the chair, in response to that question, without having the priority listing and all the numbers in front of me for all the locations that have been requested, I would suggest it's a product of the speeds that we're experiencing on the roadway. Our studies show that speeds vary between, they're lower down by the corner by Grand River Hospital, where we talked about in the area of 48 kilometers per hour, but other sections of Old Chicopee have indicated speeds between 55 and 60 kilometers per hour, and those are speeds where 85% of the traffic are traveling at or lower. So the conditions, along with the collisions, the higher volumes certainly that are experienced on Morrison Road has helped it to be a higher priority on our listing.
Okay, that's what. So in your mind, speeding is a problem there, and you've backed that up with your. When you put those things across the road, they count volume. Do they count? Can they tell speeds?
Through the chair, yes, those tubes you see on the roadway measure both volumes and speeds, and that's what we use to assess to get our existing conditions. It's important to point out that from the first public meeting, that the intent of our first public meeting when we do a traffic calming review is to explain the process to the residents that are involved, explain why we're there, explain the traffic calming program and the measures available to us, but just as importantly, have the residents confirm what the issues are to us. And we've specifically asked through that public meeting and through handouts and information packages what the issues are. The input we received from the first public meeting, the number one item identified as a resident concern, identified on 27 responses, was speeding. The second item that was identified was volume by only 10 residents, and then it goes down from there through traffic, no issues, new development, which all are in the single-digit numbers. So the input the project team received back from the residents from the first public meeting clearly indicated that speeds were of great concern through this corridor.
Have there been many collisions on that road? Well,
I've just got staff checking, but my recollection, it was probably not a significant number, maybe about 10 over 3 years.
But that is taken into account when you go through that process.
Yes, through the chair, the collision experience, excuse me, the collision experience is factored into the assessment for the priority ranking, and it's based on rate, how long the roadway is, how much volume we have on the roadway. I stand corrected. We only have 4 collisions in the 3-year periods from 2009 to 11 that was assessed before the initiation of this review.
Yeah, that criteria that we use, what is the major, is there one major component that outweighs the other ones?
All 5 factors are, if I could, without getting into details on numbers, is volume, speeds, and collisions are all assessed equally. It's 20 points out of 80. And then we've got emergency service response valued at 10 points, and also the provided amenities in the area are also 10 points. So those 5 factors add up to 80. The 3 I referred to are 20 each. So it's equal compared to speed, volume, and collisions.
Okay, because I wanted to zero in on speeding, where the part of the neighborhood do not feel that speeding is a problem. You obviously disagree.
Our studies indicate that speeds are definitely concerning.
Yeah, good, thank you. The other point, I know that wherever we have these traffic calming, I've seen it on so many occasions where people that aren't on the exact street have concerns, and I just assume that you would be looking at this when you come out with your report later on when you're going to deal with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, and that's an important point. I want to reinforce that through our review of the existing policy, the reviewing the resident input aspect of it will be an important portion of that review.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yes, Mr. Carmichael, just wondering if looking at the map on 7-6, which shows sort of an overview, and parts of Morrison Road is fairly curvy, so there would be sort of that natural calming effect happening in that when you come through a curve. Is that true? Is that usually what happens?
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, it's a fair statement. Through curves, it obviously naturally slows vehicles down. It can raise other traffic safety concerns, but the overall speeds would certainly would be lower.
Would a compromise maybe be, certainly I think that the ones that were sent to us by Mr. Reedman are a positive influence on the road, but if we were to remove 1 or maybe 2 of the other traffic calming, we would reduce the impact on the neighborhood, we would reduce the cost, but with the raised one going from the park to the other side of the park and as well as the new one at the bottom of Morrison where the curve is, we would still have some traffic calming, but it would not have as great impact on the community as they're saying, and it would reduce the cost, right?
Through the chair, my response to that is I would exercise severe caution, keeping in mind that the recommendations that we're providing and presenting to the committee today is based on the significant resident input we've had through the public meetings with the residents of Morrison Road. And any recommended changes that you might propose today, I would have concerns that the residents would not have an opportunity to speak to it.
Okay, yeah, you have said that before. Can you just help me understand what the additional cost is of the new additions?
Through the chair, our revision down at the corner near the back end of Freeport Hospital, the overall cost impact, I would suggest, is probably very comparable to what we're proposing with the first recommendation for the roadway improvement. We're certainly saving some money by not putting in the tightened radius and extra curbing, but we'll be adding costs with the sidewalk and raised crosswalk. The net impact should be fairly negligible difference.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Zaire?
Thank you very much. My questions are going to can relate to this one specifically, but the report which is being referenced a number of times that you're bringing forward on traffic calming, can you remind me at least of when the timing of that is?
Through the chair, our intention is to bring that report back to committee and council this fall to allow us to use that new policy to establish the 2014 recommended traffic calming locations.
You haven't got a firmer date than that?
Not at this point, but I would suggest we're looking at November, December.
Okay.
It'll be in place before we recommend any new locations. That's the main message.
So is this the last set of traffic calming recommendations that are coming before that report?
In response, no. There's a few other reviews we're currently working on that have been initiated based on the existing policy. We have 2 reports you're assessing today.
Okay.
And we have another one for Guelph Street that will be coming in down the road, but it's only recommending one vertical measure. Otherwise, the other reviews we're starting will be be able to do so under the new policy requirements.
And without prejudging the entire report and the recommendations that you will be coming forward with, from your work so far, is this likely to have fewer vertical deflections or more, or status quo? Can you give me some sense of the direction that this report is going?
I would suggest, obviously it's far too early to say for sure, but based on the concerns raised in our reviews thus far, is that the number of vertical measures will be reduced overall throughout the city.
Okay. Are these only questions or are they comments?
You can make a comment if you would like.
It'll be brief. It'll be brief. I really, because we have this pending report, had a pending report for some time, I'm reluctant to be going ahead with any further traffic calming measures at this time for that very reason. I have indicated in the last couple of times we've dealt with this that I have significant reservations about vertical deflections, and I think we need to find a better way. And so I'm having difficulty in supporting both this specific one and any of them actually that are dealing with vertical deflections without that report, because it may or may not change. I mean, even the recommendations that come forward from staff, we may accept them, we may not. So I think that we need to be waiting on that. That's my opinion.
Councillor Brandrich?
Well, thank you. And in terms of the implementation of this, Mr. Carmichael, well, this one may be done now in terms of a recommendation. Staff's intent would not be to do any installation until next year. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that would be our intent. It's probably too late this season to get many measures in, so 2014 would be the recommended implementation date. I would like to respond to the mayor's comments at some point if I get a chance, please.
Do you want to let him do that? Because that may shape where I go.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Carmichael.
Thank you. I appreciate what the mayor has raised and the concerns with the impending policy and the changes to it. I would caution members of council and members of the committee that the reviews that you have two reports in front of you today, Morrison Road and the one for Highview and Yellow Birch. Should we determine that vertical measures will not be recommended based on the potential of that not being the case in our new policy, it would require our staff to reinitiate both of these reviews and a couple others one more other that we've started based on the new policy. We have gone through these reviews under the current policy. We've messaged that to the residents, the emergency service groups, and were we to not proceed with the recommendations, we would be forced to go back to the residents and start the process all over again. Now, I will remind council that it's a significant impact on staff time, and not to mention the what message that may send to the residents by flip-flopping on the issue midstream through review.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, you're ready to bring forward something?
Yeah, I'm going to actually ask that we defer this issue today to council at this point in time. I'd like an opportunity to meet with Mr. Graham and any of the interested residents who'd like to discuss the issue and see if we can, develop a better understanding. Certainly, in meeting with the residents group at the end down by the hospital, Grand River Hospital, we were able to come up with a consensus on a solution that works. I do agree with the principle that those most immediately affected need to be at the forefront of the decision process, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be considering those that also end up using those roadways as well. So by deferring to Monday, it'll give us I guess it's 2 Mondays from now, it'll give us an opportunity to have a meeting and see where we might go from there with that at that time.
Okay, I'll take that deferral motion. Councillor Guzzola, did you just want to make a quick comment, or?
Went into the deferral process.
I will allow that latitude.
Okay. I want to start off by confessing that I once got a speeding ticket on Morrison. It was many, many years ago, but I want to go. Traffic calming. It's a real pain. I hate it, but it's doing what I think it's intended to do. I have a street, Greenbrook Drive, that I drive every day, and sometimes I try to avoid it, but it does do what it's intended to do, and that is slow people down. And I've said it here many times, we all speed. We all go faster than we should. It's a human nature, especially when you get on a stretch. And so I think our traffic calming has served us well. I'm sure that there are improvements that will come out of this report that's coming forward, but I think we need to keep moving forward. I think they are an inconvenience, but if they save only one life, it's well worth it. And traffic calming I was amazed a few weeks ago, I was in Toronto and I got off the beaten path and I was just one speed hump over the other, and that's fine. If the center of the universe can live with it, surely we can here too. So I would not support a deferral. I don't know. Your deferral is just to.
It's just a council.
But then we really have to defer all traffic calming things if we come up. We're gonna, we have some principles here, and we should keep true to our principles. So, in that case, I won't support the deferral because I would like to see how the rest of members of council feel about the issue, and I would like to have a vote called to see how they deal.
Okay. There's no other comments. So what we're dealing with right now is a deferral to August 26th, which would have been when it would come to be ratified regardless. So it wouldn't be a final decision today. It would come to council on the 26th regardless. So that's what Councillor Rubranovich has asked for, to meet with some residents and have additional dialogue. Those in favor? Recorded vote is fine. It's a computerized recorded vote, so we're just waiting for our computers to be set up for it. Voting's opened. And we're closed. And that carries. So it will come back to council on August 26th. Our council meeting starts at 7 p.m. Thank you for coming in today. We're now going to move on to our next traffic calming, which I think, Mr. Carmichael, you must spoke. We have 2 more to go still today, but that's all right. We'll start with Highview, Yellow Birch, the Golden Meadow neighborhood traffic. Oh, I guess that's just a review as opposed to measures, so maybe. Okay, it is measures.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I will try not to go on and on this one. It was an extensive review. Speaking of our traffic calming review for Highview Drive, we actually originally initiated a traffic calming review for Highview Drive. At our first public meeting, we had a significant attendance from the residents of Yellow Birch Drive Avenue. I'm having trouble here. Drive. To include their road. They were concerned that any impacts or any measures we put on Highview would have impacts on Yellow Birch. Long story short, we included Highview, Yellow Birch, Golden Meadow in the overall review. Through the public process, we ended up having 3 public meetings for this review. A number of issues were identified, speeding certainly being the main one, and through traffic volumes. The challenge we have in this area is it provides a direct link to our west side, Ira Needles Boulevard, and out to the expressway, so the volumes are a difficult thing to rearrange or redirect. From the extensive public input and the surveys we conducted, the final recommendation that staff are presenting to the committee today involves installing measures on both Highview and Yellow Birch. Two speed humps on Highview, one raised crosswalk on Highview, one intersection narrowing on Highview at Hickory Hollow Crescent, some parking regulation changes on Highview. It's 2 speed humps on Yellow Birch, a raised crosswalk on Yellow Birch, some parking controls on Yellow Birch, and an all-way stop at the corner of Driftwood and Highview. Staff's input on this is that the residents are in support of the recommended plan. You'll note in the report that we require a 50% response rate with 60% in favor. Our response rate was 49.3%, 0.7% short of the required 50%, but the overall support rate was over 70%. Therefore, were we to get 2 more people to provide input to meet that minimum response rate, the support rate would still be significantly over 60%. Based on that, staff are recommended measures be installed, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, I don't believe we have any delegation for this one, so I will turn it to Councillor Ioannidis.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. And the original recommendation for this traffic calming was for Highview Drive. And there was, again, as Mr. Carmichael has expressed, that there was a significant amount of residents from the following streets which instituted the traffic calming measures for the other streets. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to make it clear that Highview Drive was the primary concern. And if you do look at the Highview Drive in particular with the amount of response rate on how much they want, it's significantly in 81%. So I think the residents of Highview Drive would be very pleased with this, and along with all the rest of the other residents on the other following streets.
Okay, Councillor, I'm assuming that means you'll be removing the recommendation. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I was just trying to take a look on my BlackBerry because I do recollect that council received an email from one of the residents who was against the traffic calming, and I can't find it right off the top of my head. I was surprised by the 50.2% number. And Mr. Carmichael, really that's not much of a difference. I mean, I apologize, but it does look like you went out again to another outside area to try and bolster your numbers for the approvals. I'm not sure if where you went to, like what was the outside survey area?
In response to the chair, our process when we do the final survey is we will proactively survey each and every resident that live on the affected roadways that measures may go in on. And in this case, that included Highview Drive, Yellow Birch Drive, and Golden Meadow Drive. The outside survey responses you see are purely the people who attended our meetings that don't live on those 3 streets but showed interest through the process, and we included them through the entire process, including the final survey. So that was done based on their involvement with the process, so we included them, but separated out the results for the purpose of this report.
Okay, so just so it's very clear to me, the 50% respondents in this outside survey area were people who attended the public meeting and gave you input?
Yes, correct. These would be residents that live on some of the side streets that come in off Highview or Yellow Birch, and they ended up part of the final survey. And as you see, 15 of the 30 surveyed responded, and 6 of the 9, actually, or I should say 9 of the 15 were actually in support of it.
I guess I'm having problems with that because in the previous one, the assertion by the delegation was that the consideration from the people who came to the public meeting were not necessarily taken into consideration.
You will see that the recommendations for this report is based on only the numbers we received from the people directly affected. We provided the other numbers for information purposes only.
Okay, then well, I guess it doesn't add up to me, because I thought we had to have 50% support. We do for Highview, but we definitely don't have it for Yellow Birch or Golden Meadow. And we had really only had 15, which is less than half on Golden Meadow, 44, which is less than half on Yellow Birch, of people who responded. So I guess, it sounds to me like we're kind of pushing the numbers a little bit here on this one. And I would actually be interested to hear from the ward councillor what kind of emails or comments he was getting from residents as well. So I'll leave that question with you and see what the ward councillor says on this. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis, did you want to respond to that now?
I can unequivocally say that the residents of Yellow Birch and Golden Meadow Drive desperately wanted to be on this traffic calming. They're the ones that came out to the first public meeting, and there was probably over 100 residents at that public meeting. So they definitely wanted to be heard.
Councillor Yanetsky?
Yes, thank you. I'm just looking at the map here, and I can't find Golden Meadow Drive. Where is it located?
Through the chair, if you look to the westerly end, closer to Iron Needles, it's not labeled, but it's the roadway that connects Highview to Yellow Birch.
Okay, it should have been marked, because I hear you talking about it, and there's no reference to it. Okay, thank you. Of these 3 streets, are they major and minor collector roads?
Minor collector roadways.
All of them, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yellow Birch and Highview.
Okay, you answered the question. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, that's all the questions that we have of staff. We have a recommendation on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Looking for any comments? I don't see any. Then all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll now move on to the next traffic calming, which is Sydney Street South. Mr. Carmichael?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. This one's a lot more simpler than the other two, folks. Sydney Street South, we did a review. It was earmarked back in a report 2011. Staff has since executed the information centers with the residents. Based on the conditions in the roadway, the major concerns indicated were speeds and certainly an element of cut-through traffic, people avoiding the congestion on Ottawa Street. Number of collisions, while aren't significantly high, are probably standard for a roadway of this type. Through the process, we got very clear information from the residents. We did the final survey, and if you look at the report, you'll see the final survey. We surveyed, a total of 47 residents. 28 responded, which is our 60% response, which is more than our 50% minimum, and 96%, 27 of those 28 residents supported the plan. Therefore, based on the resident input and the conditions out in the field, the staff recommendations in front of you are recommending that a series of 3 speed humps and 1 raised crosswalk be installed on Sydney between Cortland and Charles Street.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Davey. Is there any questions? Comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I don't really know. There was enough in favor. All right. The next one is Lorraine Avenue Road Diet. So we're still talking about traffic. Mr. Carmichael?
Thank you. Hope you folks aren't too tired of me yet. In front of you is report for Lorraine Avenue Road Diet, the traffic and parking pavement marking plan. We are continually in transportation services looking for opportunities to improve the safety and efficiency of our roadways. In that regard, we work closely with engineering, and when they are establishing road reconstruction projects or just general road resurfacing projects, we try to tie into those when we have opportunities to establish improvements to the roadway to make the road safer for all users. Just as importantly, we have a new cycling master plan that's been approved, and Lorraine Avenue is identified within the cycling master plan as a on-road marked bicycle route. Engineering have advised that they are prepared to resurface Lorraine. Actually, the barrels are out on the road right now, awaiting the decision this afternoon. Will allow them to resurface the roadway, and once the resurfacing is done, we are recommending that a road diet be installed. It's similar to Margaret Avenue, which you folks have dealt with, but it's a little different in that we're taking a 4-lane cross-section down to 2 lanes. Conditions suggest that the curb lanes on Lorraine, majority of the time, are being used for on-street parking, so they're really not used for traffic capacity. Our position on implementing the road diet is the benefits that will be realized are first and foremost cycling lanes will be providing a much safer and more comfortable facility for cyclists. But just as importantly, it will more clearly mark the lane designations on the road. It will provide turn lanes at a couple of intersecting roadways that currently don't have it. And executing turns from turn lanes is a lot safer than doing so from a through lane. As well, by providing just 1 lane in each direction, this will eliminate the jostling and quick lane changes that traffic are wont to do on Lorraine to avoid turning vehicles or avoid parked vehicles. In our mind, our recommended plan, there's certainly no impact on the overall capacity and traffic capacity going through that corridor, and we feel that there's nothing but a positive recommendation by implementing the road diet as recommended. I should add to that, and my apologies, we did execute a public meeting in the area for this review. Probably a couple dozen, it was a drop-in format, a couple dozen residents appeared, and the consensus was definitely in great support of our plan.
Okay, Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I'm very much in support. Just one question. When they resurface the road, are they changing the absolute width of the road as it stands?
Through the chair, no, the curb line's staying the same, so it's just the asphalt's being replaced.
The asphalting, and so the bulk of the changes will be the $2,500 in lane painting?
Basically, yeah, the costs incurred are just for new paint.
Thank you. I'd like to move it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, not really a question, or maybe a question. And I see that Mr. Chapman is not here, but maybe you can answer it. You're saying 1,000 of this will be absorbed by the cycling budget. Is that the 200,000 that's been set aside for cycling master plan?
Through the chair, yeah, the funding we're receiving from the cycling is portion of that earmarked money you just referred to.
Okay. The other question, or maybe point I would like to make, and you and I've had a couple of disagreement on emails about this, and you're smiling, I think you know exactly what I'm going to ask for, is the signage. I know we are pretty clear about our no parking sign within bike lanes, but there are signs available that are out there that say no parking in cycling lanes. Since we are changing it, would it be not prudent to put in signs that say no parking in cycling lanes? At least then we can have a very clear, if cars are parking in the cycling lanes, and we have our dear watchdog who loves to go and check and see if people are parking in bike lanes out there, it's probably really a good idea. It gives information to the public. If they are ticketed, they understand why they're ticketed because the sign was right there. They can see it. It's not. We are going to have to make up new signs, so why not make up ones that are very clear and indicate what we're doing there?
Through the chair, in response, I appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor Fernandez, and your suggestions. I have a couple concerns, though, with going forward with said recommendation or suggestion. First and foremost, we're obligated to sign our roadways as per the Ontario Traffic Manual, and it's provincially legislated. Currently, there is no such bike lane, no parking sign that has been legally, formally accepted within the Ontario Traffic Manual. Secondly to that, while I appreciate the potential benefit, our experience is where we've had vehicles parking in bike lanes, and I'm more than open to hear otherwise, but has been where our signing has been incorrect and not the message on the sign. Where the bike lanes are separated from the curb and we have the parking bays in between the bike lanes and the curb lines, we've had absolutely no concerns with people blocking the bike lanes there because people don't park off the curb. They park adjacent to the curb. The other areas, if there's no parking there and the bike lane abuts the curb lane, the no parking signs are sending exactly the same message as a bike lane no parking sign would be. And if they got a ticket, the signs would send the same message to the driver that that's why they got the ticket. The bike lanes are in the field, they're marked through markings, and they're also augmented with bike lane signs. So in my mind, it would be unnecessarily redundant and a cost incurred for low to minimal to none benefit, with all due respect.
I don't know what to say after that.
You
I
can
guess
agree, you can agree to disagree.
I will disagree with you. Thank you for that suggestion. I will disagree with you and hope that maybe our new Director of Transportation Services will have another suggestion in the near future. I would really, truly like to see us at least try and have one sign. I realize it's not within the Ontario Ministry guidelines, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to have at least one sign there that indicates that there's no parking and cycling lanes, and that residents will not be able to argue that with a bylaw officer. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
I just have more of a comment, so I can wait.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to express my that I'm glad to see this here. I know when I first entered in council, I had spoken with Mr. Carmichael about several streets like this street in putting in road diets and seeing that there's no need for 4 lanes of traffic. Just very glad to see this, and I hope to see this even further with other streets within the city.
Okay, Mayor Zaire.
Thanks very much. I too support this. Just a question, Mr. Carmichael. In your opening comments, you said you hope it gets approved because the barrels or something are over there and ready to go this afternoon. You recognize that this doesn't get approved finally for 2 weeks, or what was your intent?
Through the chair, in response to your valid question, Mayor Zaire, the roadway is going to get resurfaced regardless of the decision today. The decision will dictate what pavement markings we apply in signing to support those pavement markings, and I can assure you we will wait till formal council approval.
I'm not worried about it because I think it'll have good support, but I guess from a process standpoint. But is even 2 weeks, will they normally be doing the lane markings within 2 weeks, though, if they're working on it right now?
I would suggest not. They haven't even gotten to milling out the existing asphalt and applying the asphalt, so no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vrbanich.
Well, no, just very quickly, I too will be supporting it. I think it's a great way of trying to address the issue and, more importantly, make it safer for our cyclists. I know the road well, and I think it makes a lot of sense to try it out in this location.
Okay, that's all the speakers that we have. It's been moved by Councillor Davey. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We will now move on to number 11, which is the. Can we do this one and then we'll have a break because I'm going to hand the chair over to Councillor Ioannidis after this one. So if we can do this one, then we'll take a little break and then move on to our last 2 items. So it's Huron Road, Strasbourg Road roundabout. Plus then traffic staff can leave. So Mr. Carmichael.
Thank you.
Just when you thought you were off the hook.
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. You'll recall late last year to committee on November 26, 2012, staff had presented a report regarding an operational review of the roundabout at Huron Road and Strasbourg Road. That was in a direct response to some parents that had appeared at council and providing some concern with the operations at the roundabout. Part of the resolution from that November meeting and the report that was assessed included a number of recommendations, and the main one being to come back to today's committee with a follow-up review and report to speak to the operations at that roundabout. And this report certainly serves to do that. I will summarize the report by saying that we recognize roundabouts are fairly new to the area, and we recognize that both pedestrians and drivers are still learning their proper and safe use. But I will also point out that at the same time, the municipalities in the region of Waterloo, headed by the region of Waterloo, have been conducting an extensive education campaign since the implementation of roundabouts to increase awareness of them and the proper use of them. As to that point, obviously there's going to be some time before both drivers and pedestrians are up to speed fully on the proper operations at a roundabout. Having said that, a review of the roundabout at Huron and Strasbourg. The volumes have increased slightly since last year when we did the study, recognizing the continuing development in the area, but they're still not significantly high. We're talking about volumes in the area of 7,000 vehicles a day on Huron Road. The speeds are certainly of concern on Huron Road and Strasbourg Road. I would suggest they're worse on Huron Road. We have the new 50-kilometer-per-hour speed limit that's been implemented on both sides of the roundabout on Huron. Supported since that November report is we've had 6 full months of police enforcement dedicated to enforcing Huron and Strasbourg. That, I will suggest, is an extremely significant dedication by our Waterloo Regional Police to this issue, and they're thanked for that, and I personally have done so. But it shows, our speed studies have shown that the speeds, unfortunately, are not changing significantly through this corridor, despite the change in the speed limit. We still have fairly higher speeds on Huron and speeds within the roundabout at the exit points in the neighborhood of the 50 to 53 kilometers per hour, which is similar to what we measured last year. The enforcement we want to continue with Waterloo Regional Police. We think it's very important to focus on this new area, and particularly with the roundabout on the corner near a high school where it is. Speaking to the conditions, there's been a total of 13 collisions at this roundabout in the 20 months since the roundabout opened. The region have developed a new policy or practice to try to estimate the number of collisions that can be expected at a roundabout based on the volumes experienced, based on the turning movements allowed, so on and so forth. And as mentioned in the report, there's an expectation through that analysis to get to expect approximately 10 collisions per year. Or I should say 11 collisions per year. We are currently experiencing a 7.8 collision per year rate since the opening of the roundabout. Just as a point of interest, the roundabout at Homer Watson and Blockline Road, which has been high profile, has experienced 137 collisions in the same time that Huron Strasbourg has experienced 13 collisions. Those 13 collisions have all been very minor in nature. There's been one single injury of a truck falling over, but it was a minor injury, and there's been absolutely no pedestrian collisions whatsoever. Staff have been out a number of times. We executed an educational campaign with the students at the beginning of the second semester in early February, assisting the students with the proper use of the roundabout. Observations by staff indicate that drivers are improving their need to stop and provide right-of-way to the pedestrians, and also at the same time that the pedestrians' use of, while they're crossing and their proper crossing, their procedures have improved as well. So we feel our education campaign has had a positive impact on that, and accordingly, we are more than happy and prepared to recommend continuing that education campaign at the beginning of each school year. We feel it's a very, very beneficial process to get the word out to those students, importantly. Also, we're also recommending a couple measures to further increase the potential safety for pedestrians walking to and from Huron Heights Public School. Firstly, through the development review for the subdivision for Templewood Drive and negotiations with the school board and the school, it was recommended and approved to implement an intersection pedestrian signal across Huron Road at Templewood. This would be approximately 300 meters, I would say, east or north, depending on which way you look at it, of the roundabout going towards Homer Watson Boulevard. It's a good connection to the new subdivision in that area and will provide a controlled crossing for pedestrians coming from the east, from the Bean Drive, the old Huron, the Templewood area, a controlled crossing directly into the schoolyard. At the same time, we recognize there's some omissions and gaps in the sidewalks and pedestrian facilities along Huron Road, and through that we're recommending that a multi-use trail be installed on the east side of Huron between Strasburg and Battler Road. We feel that the education campaign, the measures I just referred to, increasing pedestrian options and crossing options, along with the other education aspects we've done, including the portable message signs, will go a long way to just further increasing awareness in this area of the proper use of the roundabouts, and that we continue to do so. And we also obviously wish to continue to work with the region and our other local municipalities on the region-wide education campaign. In my mind, that's going to go a long way into, we just need to increase our awareness to all our drivers within the region on these things. Be happy to respond to any questions or any omissions I may have had regarding this report.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, and thank you for this this report and this review, Mr. Carmichael. I know that this was a really concerning issue for a number of residents, and looking at the speeding infractions, it absolutely, I was gobsmacked. I was like 276. Wow, and it does not look that busy when you're cycling through there. So I'm glad to see that we'll continue targeting these speeders with our police presence. I think that's really important. One of the questions I have is the once we have this intersection pedestrian signal, will we be monitoring if there are any pedestrian vehicle collisions at that point? I mean, it's a fairly visible spot that you're putting it in, and I think that that's really important. Considering that right now there's a boulevard there, so will you be cutting that out, and so that there'll be like a pedestrian island? Is that what the intention is?
Through the chair in response, yeah, long story short, there's a median in the middle of the roadway, and we do have to do some roadway improvements. You're probably familiar, there's kind of a slip-off and slip-on tangent radius at that intersection. We have to eliminate that. So we'll close that up, it'll shorten the crossing distance, and there will be a refuge area in the middle. But keep in mind, there'll be a signal control that will be timed to allow them to cross the entire road under that green signal.
Right.
In response to monitoring it, absolutely. We share that interest to see how it works, and
Okay.
We'll keep an eye on that. Having said that, both local municipalities in the region are installing more and more of these intersection pedestrian signals, and in that regard, drivers are much more aware of them and cognizant and acting appropriately around them, I guess.
Okay. Just help me understand, because I'm appalling with directions. You're talking about northbound, and there you don't have a compass on the bottom of this map. So when you're saying northbound, is that coming from Fisher-Hallman or coming from Homer-Watson?
From Fisher-Hallman towards Homer-Watson.
Okay, so they're coming up that hill at 73 kilometers an hour, approaching that roundabout.
Fair comment.
Yep. Wow. Yes. Okay. Even with the 50-kilometer speed. Okay. The Waterloo Regional Police should be making a whack of money if they're there all the time. The other question I had, and I know you've been involved in the discussions around the noise walls that are going to be along that stretch. Since we're going to be doing some more work now, the multi-use pathway does start at the roundabout, but it stops just short of the Northbrook Court. That's right, isn't it? I'm trying to think. I was just out there last week.
I believe there's just a small sidewalk connection from the roundabout down that way. I don't think there's much beyond that, though.
There's a if you're talking there's a full multi similar to if you go southbound from there's a multi-use pathway. So you're going to extend that all the way to Battler.
Correct.
Okay. So since you're going to be doing some work along there, will you be creating an access point into Northbrook Court? Because right now there's a bit of a grade and it goes down into the court. Would you be putting some kind of an access point into there? Because there are students that are coming from those townhomes, and with the development, with the Benke development, they will likely take that crescent or that court up to the walkway and then cross at that intersection. So it might be a good idea to start already putting something in that will get them moving that way, because we've got a lot of kids walking down Huron Road past Battler in that curve. I want to avoid any of that, trying to keep them on a more safe route. I just gave you two issues, and I apologize for that.
No worries. In response through the chair, no, we had not at this point planned on doing any pedestrian connection to that multi-use trail. Typically, things like that, we deal with the developers to create those connections, because we're talking about private property here. So that will be the challenge for us. We'll have to work with those property owners to see if there's a way we can get something in place. But that certainly can be followed up on.
Would that not be city property at the sort of at the top of that circle? Because there's no houses there.
Oh, I see.
You see where I'm talking?
I'll have to go back to confirm. That's certainly a potential maybe there, yes.
Okay. Then at the same time, is there an opportunity to put some trees along that stretch between the two, where the circle stops going towards Battler and where this, and then going down towards Strasbourg, off of Northbrook?
Through you, Madam Chair, in response, we can certainly follow up with the Community Services Division and see what their thoughts are on that. That's certainly beyond my scope.
Okay.
For things like that. But,
okay, so that would be something that I need to...
I'd be more than happy to, if you could provide more detail on your thoughts
Sure.
in an email to me, I'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for this. I'm also very appreciative of the multi-use trail that's going to be coming through, and I think that was all I had. Thanks.
And so does that mean you're moving the recommendation?
I would be absolutely moving this. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Ioannidis?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I definitely agree with the recommendations here. I just wanted a little more clarification on the educational part, because to me that sounds like something that's going to be taking up some staff time yearly, and was wondering if there's any video, or maybe the region has a video to maybe pass along to the school board for them to show their students, rather than having staff come in on a regular basis. It's okay to come in like the first few years, educate staff on what the rules are and regulations, etc.
Through the chair, to answer your question, that's already been done. We've worked with the high school and the school board, and had the school board install. The region has a pretty good web page related to roundabouts, and they have on there a significant number of training videos and educational videos from both the driver and pedestrian perspective. Those links and that information has directly been put into the Huron Heights website and communicated by Huron Heights staff to the students to do that. And that's part of our education campaign as well, is to increase that awareness.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Great job.
I just have one question of clarification. Did you say that the intersection pedestrian signal, that it was going to work in conjunction with the Battler light? Did I hear you say that, or did I make that up in my head? It's very possible.
In response, no, I didn't specifically talk about the progression tying the two, but I can assure you the region would do that. And keep in mind the pedestrian signal will be actuated, so it would only come up when it is used, but they'll tie it into timing-wise for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. It's been moved, and I don't see any other comments, so I'll just quickly comment that I'm happy to see this here. I think they're good improvements that are going to help, and to continue to monitor the situation in this area, I think, is important. And so I think we do continue to need the ongoing educational support through the school. But I think, speeding is not going to slow down very often. I think on Huron Road, it's a pretty fast roadway. So I think anything we can do to try and help the pedestrians and the kids crossing the school or crossing the street as well, once the commercial sites eventually end up right on the corner as well, I think is important. So I think it's important that we're doing this now. It's very timely, and I think regardless of what this report would have said, it would have been important for us to put that multi-use trail along that roadway just for connectivity all around, because it is on both sides of every other street at this point. So I think that's a good piece to come out of this as well. So with that, it's been moved by Councillor Fernandez. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we will take a 2-minute break, and Councillor Ioannidis will chair from here.
Nope. This one, right? Why is it going in your staff? And then click here. There you go. You're on.
Good afternoon, committee chair and committee members. In 1999, the City of Kitchener commenced a study to prepare a policy to assess the existing approach to stormwater management and create a citywide policy for the implementation of stormwater management. The final report in policy I-1135 was approved by Council in December of 2011, and in light of the implementation of a stormwater utility in June of 2010 and credit policy in March of 2012, the 2001 policy document is currently under review, and recommendations are intended to be presented to Council at the end of this year. The existing policy directs staff to conduct an annual stormwater monitoring program and audit to review cash in lieu fees collected, stormwater works completed, and to prioritize future rehab projects to restore or enhance the existing stormwater infrastructure to meet legislated requirements and maintenance standards. A steering committee made up of the City of Kitchener, Grand River Conservation Authority, Region of Waterloo, and the city's consultants conduct this audit and monitoring program on an annual basis. I'm pleased to provide staff report INS 13-034, which contains the results of the 2012 audit, along with the recommendation that the 2012 swim audit results be received and endorsed by Council. As in previous years, the 2012 audit also provides recommendations for the following year's work. The most notable recommendations for 2013 include establishing flow proportionate sampling stations to develop event mean concentrations of pollutants in creeks. Once event mean concentrations are established, we'll be able to more accurately establish water quality trends in watercourses, and we'll be able to reduce the amount of wet weather sampling in those locations, which could result in a modest savings in laboratory costs. Additionally, in 2013, it was recommended we begin collecting baseline information about the impact road de-icers have on chloride levels in 33 swim facilities that have been identified as potential threats to the drinking water supply under the region's draft policy for the protection plan under the Ontario Clean Water Act. The 2012 report also recommends taking into future consideration the installation of interpretive signage in all swim facilities to provide information about the name and function of the facility, as well as city contact information if residents want to report anything, as well as installing all signs at all road crossing where streams and creeks currently cross, in a similar fashion to the practice followed along Ontario highways to create additional public awareness about stormwater and to help identify specific locations where issues may arise. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Dave Maunder from Aquifer Beach Limited to present the water quality monitoring results for 2012.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Nick. And I'm just going to see. Okay, there's always the instance of how you get this to start. There we go. It's on everybody's screen, I assume. So with that, I'd just like, let's pull this closer together. There we go. So I just want to give a bit of an overview. I'll start off with the background. I just give a bit of a summary of the 2012 results, areas that had good performance, areas in need of improvement. Talk briefly about the cash in lieu results and the 2012 projects. As Nick just touched on, the recommendations, subtle changes for the 2013 program, and future considerations. So the background, as Nick mentioned, the study had started in 2001. The 2012 program was actually based on the recommendations from the previous year. We looked at 6 sites, and when we looked at these sites, we looked at water quality, which is the chemical analysis, the biological, which are fish and bugs, and then the physical monitoring, which is things like temperature and the likes. And the monitoring is conducted to prioritize the stormwater works, and basically, as again was mentioned, just to see how things are working over the time. And as noted, it's many years of data is required. You get dry years, you get wet years, and you do get variability in flow data and water quality data over time. So you'll see some of the trend information we're going to show. So there are 6 sites that we monitored at, and we have sort of a basic illustration of each one. One of them is on Kolb Drain, referred to as KD1 as I move forward, just giving you an idea where the samples were taken. Montgomery Creek near Shelley Drive, MG1. Sandrock Greenway, SR2 at Queens Boulevard and West Heights Drive. And then 2 on Strasburg, one at Strasburg Road and Trillium Drive. And then the second one referred to as SB2, which is at Marl Meadow Drive and Bain Drive. And on the bottom left, you have recent reconstruction of Brigadoon Pond. And then the last one, Henry Sturm Greenway, referred to as HS3 at Fisher Hallman Road and Fenwick Court. So as we mentioned, the 2012 program, basically what we did is we took what's called grab samples, so a single sample during 4 wet weather events. The wet weather events, we tried to get at least 10 millimeters of rain, so it was a reasonable sample, a representative sample. By way of analysis, your average rainfall event's about 5 millimeters. We got 1 event during the winter period. There is seasonality, obviously things like chlorides and that would be used more in the winter than they would in the summer and that. We also tried to look at what the conditions in the streams were during dry weather conditions. So we took 5 samples during dry weather conditions. And to ensure it was dry weather, we waited for a period of 48 hours after a significant storm sewer event, or rainfall event, sorry. The parameters, without going into the detail, they're referred to as general chemistry parameters. So you have things like chlorides, E. coli, nitrates, total phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, and total suspended solids. Total suspended solids is a general indicator, and a lot of times if your total suspended solids levels are high, your copper, your zinc, your lead, etc. are attached to them. So it's a very good general indicator of water quality. We also looked at things like pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, and conductivity. The biological monitoring, as I mentioned, we looked at the bugs, the benthic invertebrate community. The reason you look at the bugs is they can't go anywhere. They're attached to rocks. So if there's a spill or if there's bad water quality, the bugs will give you an indication of whether there's good, bad, or indifferent water quality in the area. So they're one form of biological method you look at. The fish themselves, they can move around, and they're the end product that you're usually looking at in a stream. But they may be impacted more by other things in water quality, including areas where they can't get through because there's barriers, or if it's a concrete channel and stuff like that. So you need to look to see the end product. You need to look at both the bugs and the fish. So the physical monitoring, as mentioned, was continuous flow at a series of locations and temperatures. Some fish, for example, brook trout, are very, very sensitive to warm water. If it gets much above 22 or 23 degrees, they're not going to last long, and they're going to try and move elsewhere. So the good performers, I'm going to show them sort of in chart form, and then I'm going to really just show it to you in a series of graphs. So the good performance in 2012, and remember some of these sites have been in place for 10 to 12 years, or 8 to 12 years, sorry. So the highest water quality was actually in what's referred to as Strasburg 2. The greatest density of fish species, brook trout, were found in and around this location, so we're talking about the Brigadoon Wards area. And we found over 70 adult, juveniles, and young captured at Wards and Brigadoon in 2 separate occasions. The Henry Sturm 3 site had good to moderate performance. The poorer performers for 2012 were Kolb Creek, which was moderate. Montgomery Creek was classified as poor. Strasburg 13 was also classified as poor, and Sandrock Greenway was classified as poor to moderate. There were 5 sites. If you're looking at trends, so the next few slides are going to show trends. In other words, over time, are the water quality conditions getting better or worse? So there's 5 sites where we had 8 or more years of data, and there's a summary of them there. I'm going to show them slide by slide, but you'll see at 3 of the sites the chlorides have gone up, nitrates have gone down at 1, and for the rest of them. So if you look at the historical trends, the chlorides had gone up at, just going to make sure I got the right locations. Just one second, please. So the chlorides had gone up at Kolb, and one case on Strasbourg, and on Henry Sturm, so you can see that there's an increase there. The nitrates had gone down at the Montgomery Creek site. So for the other 5 or the other 4, if we're not showing anything, that means there's no consistency, so the values could have been going up and down over time. So for phosphorus, again, I believe this is Montgomery as well. So again, at the other locations, the total phosphorus was up and down and over the place. So Montgomery is the only one where we're seeing a consistent trend moving upwards. The dissolved phosphorus has gone up at the Henry Sturm, the Kolb, and the second site on Strasbourg Creek. And the zinc has gone up significantly at the Henry Sturm site as well. So that was the one that had the most increases. Again, at the other 4, there's no consistent trend over time. So the results from previous years for 2012 versus the previous years, the overall water quality has decreased in Montgomery Creek. So this is sort of 2012 versus the previous 7 to 9 years. And the overall water quality had improved in Kolb Creek, Strasbourg Creek, at Bain downstream of Brigadoon, and at the Henry Sturm site. The key findings, try to put this in perspective. It's very difficult to try and meet provincial water quality objectives in an urban stream. Typically, stormwater runoff has values of concentrations coming out that are approximately 1 order of magnitude above what the provincial water quality objectives are. Thus, that's why numerous municipalities spend money in monitoring and undertaking programs to retrofit stormwater ponds and to try and provide ways of reducing concentrations getting into your stream. So there are still stormwater improvements that are still required. What was noted, as I showed in the graphics there are visible benefits from an aquatic perspective at Wards and Brigadoon due to the rehabilitation works to online dams that were taken off stream. We now have the brook trout back up there where they were not previously. Just on some of the cash and lose stuff, which applies to the redevelopment and infill sites. So this is before your stormwater utility. In 2012, $423,000 was collected, and there was $180,000 approximately spent for 2 oil grit separators at Mill Street, and 1 which is planned for Snyder Creek as part of the Phase 1 works. It's ongoing. So the evolution of the cash and lieu fees was $38,820 up until March 12, 2012, and it's been increased to account for inflation up to a value of $48,525 in 2013, based on inflation, the actual cost of the facilities. And for very small sites, less than 1.1 of a hectare, there's a flat fee of 1/10 of the $48,000. The 2012 projects that were undertaken, the most significant one would be the Victoria Park Lake. There's also the showcasing water innovations and finding better uses for stormwater pond sediments. The first of 3 phases, I believe, for Schneider Creek restoration. Phase 1, the naturalization and erosion measures were implemented. And the Kolb Drain EA is underway, and construction is anticipated in 2015. So the recommendations for 2013 is to continue the water quality monitoring at core stations and establish event mean concentrations for 1 site. Just to give you a little bit of an indication of what we're trying to do there, what we're doing now is taking grab samples at each of the locations I showed you. So over the course of a 4 or 5 hour period when the runoff increases in the stream, we're literally just taking 1 sample. What event mean concentrations allow you to do is to take samples over a numerous time periods during the course of the event, thus getting better representation of what the true water quality conditions are. This is a thing that's commonly used in a lot of different areas. In essence, listening to some of the previous conversations on the traffic, it would be like seeing 20 cars come by, getting the speed of 1 car and saying, okay, the average speed was 65. When in essence what an event mean concentration does is you get the speed of each of those 20 cars, you add them up, and you get a true representation. So the whole idea behind the flow proportion samples is to give a better indication of what the actual water quality is in the stream. It involves continuous flow and water quality sampling, and basically it's done on a time frame or a volume of water that comes in. There was a discontinuation at one site, Henry Sturm 3, because of the proposed retrofit of Pond 30, which will result in periodic discharge of sediment. And as Nick alluded to begin monitoring 33 stormwater facilities that are within the source protection areas as per the region policies. And as part of this year, there will be a review done of the existing stormwater policy that was done in 2001. So the swim review policy will assist developing a policy that is consistent with new stormwater utility model, which came into play a year or two ago, ensure that the cash and lieu practices are consistent with current initiatives, and really provide 2013 recommendations as opposed to 2001 recommendations as to what should be done with respect to policy and practices. As was mentioned again, there's also, from a non-technical perspective, to install interpretive signage at each of the facilities and watercourses to create public awareness. And the signage would highlight that what the facilities are intended to do. Some of them just deal with flooding, some of them deal with flooding, erosion, and water quality. Give it a name, a design, and the function of it. Tie that together with the watercourse so you know where the water is discharging to it. And then city contact. That should be contact information and additional information that should people want to know further information. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. We do have a couple questions so far. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Dave. I know that Aquifer Beach has been quite involved with our stormwater ponds for a number of years now. What would you say this is? How many years have we been engaging your company?
5.
5 years, okay. I thought it was about that. A couple of questions that I have. The sampling that you're talking about was taken from the summer of 2012, or the season of summer of 2012. Yes. So we had a very dry summer. You said you had taken 4 wet samples. Was there some difficulty in obtaining those wet samples when we had about 6 weeks of almost minimal rain? Would that change the outcomes as opposed to maybe what we would be seeing this year with all of the rain and wet weather we've had?
We were able, through you, Mr. Chair, we were able to get 4 significant samples of 10 millimeters or more. There will be variation on a year-by-year basis. If you go back and try and find a statistically average year now, because of climate change, whatever, you can't seem to find that. We get very wet years, we get very dry years.
True. Yeah. And I guess my concern, not necessarily last year, but this year, because I think with the intensity of rains, and it isn't just the amount, it's the intensity, which flushes out a lot of silt and sediment and flushes oil and grit down into those streams. I'll be interested when will you be doing your sampling for this year, or have you done it already?
We've started some of it, but it's not complete.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that comes out. You do this you do the sampling every year. Is there a rationale for doing it every year, or is it possible to extend it to every 2 years? Since we're seeing, some things are really pretty consistent. You've pointed out some of the areas we're seeing increases in phosphorus and zinc and chlorides. Since we're creating a fairly good constant baseline, would we be able to do this every 2 years?
I think, through you, Mr. Chair, one of the things we're trying to do is we've recommended to the city since we took over this in 2011 to do event mean concentrations. So that's the more detailed sampling, to do more detailed sampling at representative sites. So the general idea over time would probably be not to look at all 6 sites, but to do detailed sampling at more representative sites for about the same cost. It provides a better picture.
Okay. You were talking about some fish captures And my interest, you probably are well aware, has always been Strasburg Creek. So if you can, is it possible for you to go back to some of your previous slides?
I can only say yes after I get it to work. Do you want the one with?
I think it was the fish captures. I was interested to see were you aware, were they mainly brook trout, or there you 70 adults, juveniles, and captured?
Yeah, Will's here with me. Am I? Yeah, that's what I thought. They were all brook trout.
Okay, all right. That's really good to hear, because
Yes,
I know we were down to like 2 at some point in time. Just a quick clarification, because I was writing when you wrote down when you were identifying the different locations. Strasburg 1-3, I think it is, and then Strasburg 2. I just wanted to make Strasburg 2 is the one that's downstream from Bean Drive.
Yeah, it's at Marl Meadow and Bean, yeah.
Okay, so that, and then Strasburg 1-3, is that the one that's up by Battler?
Yeah, it's at Strasburg and Trillium, that area.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that and that's the one that you said that the chlorides had increased at Strasburg 1-3.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, because, and that would make sense, because that's adjacent to Huron Road, which has just been widened, and you've got 4 lanes of traffic going through there. Is there something that you would suggest? And I mean, I don't want to just focus on Strasburg Creek, but Strasburg Creek does flow down to the Grand River. I'm pretty sure the Henry Sturm does as well. I mean, eventually most of them do, but this one's a little bit, I guess, in closer proximity. Have you checked out Dune Creek? I know that goes directly into Grand River. Do you, or was that something that was on our radar ever in the past?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, maybe I'll have to ask staff. Have we looked at doing some monitoring along that stretch? Because especially with the incredible development that we have now in the Dune South area and the grading, I mean, I've noticed a real change in the water along that creek channel.
Through you, Chair, we currently don't have a monitoring station in Dune Creek, but that would be something we would look at holistically and see if it warrants adding a station there. That's something that could be considered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, if there's one that we're going to reduce or take off of monitoring, I would think that might be one that we really need to take a look at. So you might want to, if you can, take a look at suggesting that one. The cash and lieu policy that you're talking about, I don't know if this is a question for you, Dave, or for our staff. Am I asking both people at the same time?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how much we've collected in the last year, for example? Like I know you're telling us that we increased it to 48,000 per hectare, these are numbers from 2012.
Yes, so through you, Chair, in 2012 we collected $423,000 in cash and lieu charges, and we spent approximately $180,000 in implementing stormwater controls.
I apologize. I did read that in the report. I apologize for asking that question. I should have stuck it. A sticky note on that. One of the other things that I noticed that you were recommending, Dave, and I think that it's really important because a lot of people don't understand the value of stormwater ponds and what they're trying to replicate what Mother Nature would normally have done before development happened, right? Is these interpretive signs and this information. Maybe you can't answer this question, but maybe staff can. So what kind of costs are we looking at here? And are the funds coming out of our cash in lieu?
Through you, Chair, we haven't costed that out yet, but we are intending to. I think most likely the funding source would be from the stormwater utility through the stormwater implementation line item in the capital budget. And just because cash and lieu funding is primarily intended to put facilities in the ground to actually control and provide stormwater control for quantity and quality. So we'd want to make sure that we keep using it for its intended purpose.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I write that down so that I don't ask that again. Just so I understand, and I apologize, Dave, for keeping you up there. I'm going to try and make sure I get to another question that relates to what you just presented. Our stormwater, our cash in lieu is specifically earmarked for facilities in the ground, so more stormwater ponds.
Through you, Chair, it could be stormwater ponds or oil grit separators. But the primary intention behind that was to provide communal stormwater infrastructure that can serve more than one property. And then as properties develop in that catchment area, they contribute to this pot of money, which is then used to implement stormwater controls downstream of them.
Okay, thank you. I got to the good news about the brook trout. The other one that I was considering asking about was you noted on 12/45 the identification of poor performance in 2012, which were classified as sites consistently producing analytical water quality. You're suggesting that we continue monitoring the sites, which I think is important. But will you be making recommendations to the city on actions that we can take or policies or restrictions that we can take that would reduce, not reduce, but make these poor performers better performers?
Through Mr. Chair, I'll start it. And I mean, as part of this year's process, we will be reviewing the 2001 policy and making recommendations as to how that policy can be improved, basically to bring it up to speed with 2013, 2014 measures. The field of stormwater has changed in light of what you're saying. It's changed not only to looking at stormwater ponds, but using source control measures, getting people to do things on their own property, integrating stormwater into roadworks. So that would come out likely as part of our policy review.
Okay. I have a couple more questions of staff, but I don't want to leave Dave hanging there if there's other people who want to ask questions of Dave.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Okay.
Councillor Yaneski.
Having read the report, I could have had a lot of questions, but basically I'm just going to concentrate in the analysis that's in my ward. And basically that's the Henry Sturm analysis. You had records from 2007 and 2012 that you compared, and basically said you had you weren't able to arrive at any conclusion. And is that a concern that you weren't able, based on the analysis, a concern to worry about, or is that just you just couldn't come up with some type of scenario that provides an answer?
I'm not exactly, sorry, through Mr. Chair, I'm not exactly, could you repeat the statement and maybe put it?
You have in your report on page 22 in Henry Sturm, it says it's difficult to conclude if elevated monitoring resulted record in 2012 are directly related to the function of pond 22. So, and that's when you look back, that's the analysis that you did between 2012 and 2007. So, I'm seeing that you didn't come to any conclusion, and I can understand that, but is that a concern? Or is that just, I don't know, it leaves me wondering.
Oh, sorry, just trying to read the statement now.
That's the last paragraph
Yeah.
on page 22 of your report.
Well, I think what it's trying to say is when pond 20, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, when we retrofit pond 22, you would expect to see an improvement because you're taking the contaminants out, putting them in the pond as opposed to the stream. But based on 1 year's monitoring, it's difficult to see. There's not a direct cause-effect relationship that's showed in the monitoring data.
So is that a concern, or is that just because it didn't translate
No, I
into what you were looking for in terms of results?
I think over time you will see it, but I think further back to Councillor Fernandez's comment, there's dry years, there's wet years. So again, I'll go back to the same one. If one car is speeding, it doesn't mean the other 19 are.
So a future sample may provide you with some type of analysis, yet you say that this area in the Henry Sturm area will be exempt from analysis in this coming year.
Well, that's because we're retrofitting, we're reconstructing another pond in the area, so we know there'll be a lot of solids from it, so it's just a one-year phenomenon.
Okay.
Mr. Golian can add some comment to that question as well.
I can't hear you.
Mr. Golian can add some questions to that comment.
Oh.
Yeah, through your chair, I just wanted to add quickly, with Pond 22, through the monitoring that we're conducting right now, we've noticed that we've got a resident muskrat that's been eating the plantings that we've put in there, and those help to, those are intended to help filter some of those pollutants out of the water. And we're looking at actually identifying some plant species that are not their favorite to snack on. So that should help when we find something like that. And in addition, now that we've just about completed the retrofit of Pond 30, which is also contributing to the same water course, we would anticipate that future monitoring results will see improvements.
So where's exactly Pond 22? I know I know the analysis, as you said, Fisher Hallman and Fenwick Court, and behind there, but I don't see any pond there. Or is there another area you're referring to?
Sorry, you can't see it well. Will, you want to? My eyes aren't as good as his. So.
Sure.
Whoops, pressing the wrong one.
Sorry, I'm Will Callan from Aquifer Beach through the
Can
chair.
you speak into the mic, please?
Sorry. I'm Will Callan from Aquifer Beach. Through the chair, one, to answer the previous question or help out with it, is there was only one additional year of monitoring done at that station on Henry Strum. So statistically, from 1 year, we only had 2 years of monitoring data for that station. So it's difficult to make conclusions based on grab samples from just 2 years. Secondly, Pond 22 is just upstream of the sampling location out on West Forest Trail. As you take West Forest Trail off Victoria, you get into that little area, and it's just kind of to the end of the street before it heads west. It's kind of...
Is that before it goes under Fisher Hallman?
Henry Strum, yeah, the monitoring site is just downstream. I guess it would be east of Fisher Hallman, and then the Pond 22 site is upstream of that, so further west. It's right by the school. There's another swim pond there. I forget what the
which school?
I forget what it's the elementary school there in West Forest Trail, where that pedestrian trail goes through. It's just
Sandhills Public School.
Sandhills? Okay.
I think something like that. Yeah. So it's just south of that pedestrian trail there.
Okay, I got you.
That's where I live.
Okay. It's interesting. The notes I had made here, now my question sort of has to be modified based on your comments in terms of the upstream analysis. I'm not sure whether you're aware of or not, but the Henry Sturm Greenway, where there's the concrete channel, which is south of Victoria, east towards Belmont Avenue, is going to be undergoing removal and going through a naturalization process over the next couple years. My question to you is that it's a concrete channel, and there's only water flow at a very minimal when there's no rainfall. And of course, when there's rainfall, it gets quite full. By removing that concrete channel and putting naturalization over the next 2-3 years, will that have an impact or anything in terms of the water quality and all the concentrations of the chemicals or the chemicals that are in there that you're doing the analysis on? Will that improve it or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, removal of the concrete channel and putting in a natural channel won't have any impact on the water quality, with the exception of during construction there'll be release of sediment, which would mean you'd have elevated suspended solids.
Okay, but the channelization that's going to be done is downstream from your Pond 22. So will that help, or is that really has no impact? Because I didn't know where Pond 22 was. That's where my dilemma was.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, the ponds impact water quality and flow. The reason the naturalization is done is to improve habitat for fisheries and terrestrial species and the like.
Okay. Next question I have. So there's fish in the Henry Sturm sample location number 3. Is that correct? I mean, I'm going to your page 31 of your report.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what type of fish they were. I'd have to check.
Well, I really wasn't concerned about what type. I was surprised that there was fish there because there's a channel, and I'm just wondering, I don't see any fish in the channel. I've walked the channel, and there's no more than half an inch in depth at its low time period, when there's no rainfall. But I was wondering how they could survive and the fish be there if there's hardly any water.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in a very general sense, there's three types of fisheries. There's a tolerant fishery that can live in almost anything. There's a moderate fishery, and then there's the very sensitive species like brook trout, which require good habitat, good water quality, lots of base flow, that kind of thing. So you'd be surprised where you will find certain species of fish.
And that'd be upstream from the concrete channel. Is that what you're referring to?
They could be upstream, and they could be migrating
through Monarch Woods.
Yeah, they can migrate through a concrete channel, assuming there's no barrier during wet weather conditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Final question is, I'm reading a report, and I forget where it was, but you indicated that there was concern expressed about the potential stormwater management ponds being located in the regional groundwater recharge areas. And there are a bunch of swim ponds there right now. What type of concern is raised in terms of what are the concerns?
Yeah, through you, Chair, the concern is chlorides infiltrating through the pond and getting into the groundwater aquifer where the region is pulling our drinking water from. The challenge with chlorides is they're difficult to they're extremely expensive to remove out of the water. So we're seeing in our regional drinking water, we're actually seeing chloride levels rising. And the source protection policies being developed by the region are intended to address that concern and identify potential remedial measures that need to take place to prevent that from happening. So we're at the very early stages right now of just collecting baseline data and using that to help inform future decisions on what type of activities can take place to help that situation.
Have you been in communication with the region because they do the recharge thing? Have they expressed a concern, or is this totally two separate matters?
No, through you, Chair, this is in direct communication with the region and working with them in developing the draft policies, as well as every other municipality and township in the region being engaged in that process as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Zaire.
Thank you. I have just two questions. And considering everything that has been asked so far, you have the individual statistics for each of these, and you made a qualitative comment on some of them being either improved or perhaps decreased in quality. Overall, can you make any judgment? Do you want to make any judgment as to saying this is good, bad, or indifferent in terms of the water quality compared to other municipalities that you are involved with in testing?
To you, Mr. Chair, I'll maybe try and answer this generally, and then I'll try and get into some specifics. Water quality in streams, in urban streams, is fairly consistent and universal. And by that, I mean we've been fortunate enough to do studies that have compared water quality across the states in Canada. A car is a car, so that's there. Typically, how it improves is based on how many stormwater ponds you have. So you're going to start with bad up here, and when you start putting your stormwater ponds in, you'll remove it down. Again, just a very general comment. Most contaminants that are coming from a storm sewer without treatment are an order of magnitude higher than what you'd want to see to meet provincial water quality objectives. And a pond probably helps to reduce that by about two-thirds. So if you were 10 times above it, you're going to be about 3 times above it. It varies, from stream to stream. For example, Strasburg Creek has a lot of base flow. It's a very healthy stream. Some of the other ones have been concrete lined. There's clay in the areas, so there's a variability within the city in that regard.
Okay, so you were talking about the water quality, and I think it was in perhaps answering to one of the other questions in terms of the amount of water that's flowing. So quantity, rather, of water flowing through this has some impact on the quality then as well. Yes.
To you, Mr. Chair. Well, you have issues with respect to the quality of water and the quantity of water.
Yeah. So, but you were not dealing with the quantity of water, even though the quantity can affect your quality. Is that correct?
The quantity you're primarily, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, the quantity you're primarily concerned with things like erosion and flooding and the likes like that.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess, and perhaps to Nick, then the quantity will be addressed in more so in the report that you're bringing later this year. Is that correct? Or not necessarily?
Through you, Chair, I'm not totally clear on the question.
Well, we've established policies for stormwater management, and there's certain standards that have been set because of historical water levels, storm levels that we've had. So we're seeing that may be different in the future. We don't know how it will be different. It could be. So therefore, will future reports, not necessarily this one, deal with how we're going to address the quantity with our existing stormwater ponds and other things related to the SWIM program that we have.
Yeah, so through you, Chair, there are two fundamental components to stormwater management, which are quantity control and quality control. The science of stormwater management has evolved in the sense that starting in the 70s, the primary focus was just about getting the water away from properties as fast as possible. So that was really quantity-based. And but that leads to concrete channels and sort of these non-natural systems. What we've begun to learn is by moving the water faster away from properties, we're creating an erosion concern and issue in our existing water courses. And so that is, now a new criteria that we look at when we're doing these designs. So we're looking at the effects of quantity and erosion and flooding in streams. And stormwater ponds initially in the 80s were built strictly for quantity control. So they were acting as sort of retention basins that would then release the water more slowly into our water courses and help to reduce erosion. For the pond 22 and pond 30, which have just recently been retrofit in the Henry Sturm Greenway, those were originally only quantity control ponds, and they've been retrofit now to also provide quality control. So there's an extended detention period that the water needs to be held in the pond to allow those sediments and pollutants to settle out before the water is released into the water course. And so we're hoping to see an improvement in water quality results based on the work that's being completed there. And further, in 2012, we commissioned the University of Waterloo to review our intensity, duration, frequency curves, which is a design parameter that we use in determining the intensity of storms, the frequency, and how long they last for. And they used the most recent available data from the Waterloo Region Airport and found that our existing design parameters are actually conservative based on the last 30 years of information that was available. So the discussion in the industry that's taking place now is there, with climate change, that a potential total rethink needs to be done on how we calculate and what design parameters we use when designing stormwater pipes and conveyance systems and ponds. But that's an evolving discussion, and it hasn't really settled on an answer for us yet.
Okay. What made me think of this was for a completely different reason. I had talked to Ms. Houston, I think it was last week, in terms of a pond near where I live, and when with big storms, it constantly overflows and then causes the erosion, not within the pond, but just as the outflow, and therefore the quantity becomes the issue, and I assume that had a significant effect then on the quality. I think that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. That's it for questions for you, Mr. Marauder. we'll just have if Councillor Fernandez can just answer your questions quickly to staff. We are running a little bit behind.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions because our stormwater ponds are trying to mimic what Mother Nature would have done normally. So it really impacts our aquifers and our drinking water. So I think it's really crucial that we get this right. So my questions are regarding one of the things that I noticed we talked about public consultation. This presentation that we've just been looking at, was this the presentation that was given to the Environmental Committee?
That's correct.
So with the pictures and...
Through you, Chair, I think there may be a few extra slides in this one.
Yeah, there definitely are a few extra slides in this one. And the reason I bring that up is because if we're using that meeting as a public consultation, I have to take some serious umbrage with that because, first of all, the committee was ill-prepared to make any comments on this. Some of the slides were very difficult to see. So if we are going to be using this as a public consultation, I think we have to make sure that the Environmental Committee has the opportunity to review the information well before they're sitting in their meeting so that they understand and they can ask questions that are prudent to this information. That's part of their job as an advisory committee so that they can advise council properly on what they see and what their concerns are. One of the things that I did want to ask about is how often and how do we decide which stormwater ponds are cleaned up and dredged? And how frequent? I know that you just talked about two of the Henry Sturm ones.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Roughly every 5 years, we've conducted an inventory of our ponds and watercourses and assessed the condition that they're in to prioritize when they need to be cleaned out and or replaced. So that information, we have that documented, and it informs our decision-making process. We are right now in the process of creating an inspection process that we can conduct with our own staff as opposed to hiring consultants to do the work for us. And we're just sort of finalizing that process right now and figuring out a way to get it into our existing work programs and systems. So that's sort of an ongoing thing that we're evaluating. But we are due in 2014 and 15 to do another comprehensive inventory to refresh that data and see if any priorities have changed.
We have roughly 120 stormwater ponds. Is that?
Yeah, that's approximately right.
Okay, yeah. So if we're trying to keep on top of them, that's a pretty arduous task. In our recommendations, we are suggesting that we receive and endorse the report by Aquifer Beach. One of the future considerations is on page 12-49. It suggests that the cost of instrumentation, so that an ISCO sampler, is that what you were speaking about, Dave? Sorry, just nod, if that's what you were speaking. Okay. That we consider using some of these. Such capabilities provide options to collect continuous measurements for parameters such as pH, oxygen, conductivity. The cost of the instrumentation would be in addition to the $25,000 annual cost for each flow proportionate sampling location. Are we, by accepting this report, accepting that recommendation as well?
Through you, Chair, that would be specified in the terms of reference in a future program. So this year we have included one of these samplers. The intention is to ultimately have two of them. And if you refer to page 12-46, it actually lays out a rotation schedule for moving these samplers around and developing event mean concentrations for each water course. And once we do have, I'll just reiterate, once we do have the event mean concentrations, we can only do the dry weather sampling in that water course in future years. So there wouldn't be an anticipated large increase in overall program costs on an annual basis.
So just make sure I heard you correctly. There would not be an increased cost on the sampling over the... Sorry, I just want to make sure I understood
Through the chair, to clarify, we had enough dollars in this year's budget to include one sampling station. The intention would be to increase the annual monitoring budget by $25,000 to accommodate a second sampling station next year, and potentially some other initiatives that we would be looking at doing as part of the monitoring program.
Okay, so can you just remind me what, with no disrespect to Aquifer Beach, what was the cost of the consultation and the audit that we just did by them? What was the fee?
Yeah, through the chair, this year I believe it was in the order of $100,000.
Okay, so $100,000, and you're asking for an additional $25,000 or possibly $50,000 for these new monitoring?
Sorry, through the chair, I stand corrected. It was 80 this year, and we have an annual monitoring budget around 90,000. We did see some savings over the past couple of years, so we were able to. We had funds available to get one of these sampling stations this year, and we would be looking to increase the budget by $25,000 for next year as part of this year's budget process.
Okay, and that's kind of what I had suspected. So I guess as much as I want to endorse and receive this report, I think Council needs to understand that there may be some budget implications here if we accept the recommendation as stated in this report by Aquifer Beach. So before I, sort of agree to supporting this, I think that maybe the rest of Council needs to understand that there could be budget implications here. And I realize that this is enterprise budgeting, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chapman. Yes, he's nodding his head. Okay, just so that we know where we are. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have.
Okay, that concludes all the questions. Councillor Galloway moves the recommendation. Are there any discussions? Councillor Fernandez. Is that?
No, that was me from before.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We're going to move on to item number 13. Dealing with windy issues such as the windstorm event. And let me just, Mr. Hummel is it Mr. Hummel will be presenting? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hummel.
To you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, in front of you is a report 13-070 that deals, information report dealing with the wind storms on July 19th and the 27th. In the report, it identifies the approach by city staff, the priorities and how we dealt with them, and some of the items that we dealt, whether it's hydro or the fire, and how we responded to the storm. For your information and certainly for discussion and any direction from committee.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. First question. In terms of the frequency of these storms, does staff have an idea of whether the frequency is increasing, or would that require some research?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it certainly needs more research. From what we've heard is to expect more of them, expect this type of intensity. Typically in the past we've seen one, these windstorms, and we've already saw 2 in 1 week period. So if we believe everything we're hearing, it's certainly something we're looking into, but we don't have a specific data right now.
In terms of the timing for response to remove some of the down trees, going on a go-forward basis, if the frequency does increase, is the response, I guess it was 3 or so weeks, is that going to be a sustainable sort of time frame for response?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it really comes down to how committee and council wants to approach this. I mean, we certainly could, like a winter storm, could have called in 120 plus staff to jump on trying to clean up the debris, branches, do many of the things we did over the 3 weeks to date. We estimated a 4-week time to clean up from the storm. It comes down really to what resources and how much money we want to throw to cleaning. I think the approach we did was fairly effective. We're into week 4. We're certainly, by the end of last week, already into the neighborhood parks, and we're anticipating heavily the bulk of the storm cleaned up by the end of this week, which would be the 4-week duration.
Okay, I know we recently started putting money into a set aside for a winter storm budget. Do we know approximately, I don't recall the figure for that.
So, okay.
Or you could return with it if you don't have the information handy.
I can tell you.
Oh, your staff 5, sorry.
From my recollection, we have $54,000 in the storm reserve. That was put in last year.
54,000. Okay. Remaining. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Has there been any thought put towards possibly consolidating, just instead of having a winter storms budget, just simply having a unforeseen weather event budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't had that discussion yet. I'm sure we can have it determine whether or not that's the most appropriate approach.
Okay. I would like to make a recommendation after.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much. I have one question and then a few comments based on my own observations and comments from residents in the community. But my question is on the amounts that we've spent from forestry right now. It basically means that we have had, I mean, there's a portion that you're saying is overtime, and that's going to be over and above the operations budget. But there's another chunk that we've had to pull out of our general forestry operations. So I guess I just want to understand what that means in terms of what's not getting done. Is it putting us seriously behind on anything, and do we need to address that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what it really has impacted the forestry department is the amount of street raising, structural pruning that we've started into the last couple of years, as well as just the regular tree removals, stumping that we normally do. Ultimately now we're a month behind that, but it's one of those activities where we have to do it every year. So ultimately means streets we would have done in September, October would be happening now in April, May. We will be getting to them. And what it does do is, as a bus or a garbage truck is going down the street and those branches are hitting the top of those vehicles, it means we're a month behind removing those. So it's an activity that has to happen for the quality of the tree and along the lifespan of the tree. But it's one of those things that we can get away with for a month, but ultimately we will get to it. It's just everything's pushed back a month.
Okay, so in other words, if we had a bunch more of these the rest of this summer and fall and next spring, then maybe we need to raise an alarm bell, but at this point it's just delaying things and we'll catch up as we can.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's one of those things, depending on the timing of the year of a storm. Because it was July and we had such a wet spell up to that point, it wasn't as though we could pause grass cutting or some of the other activities that we did. I mean, the impact's on forestry, but as we paused some of the other activities within operations, we had the little bit of flexibility there. If it was more into the fall, because we're not cutting grass, there would have been more opportunity to pull bodies off other items that they do. So it really depends when the storm hits and how we could react, but it's certainly the thing we're looking at, the flexibility within the operations department.
Okay. So I guess a few comments in terms of things I've heard from residents. Obviously, a lot of people were relying on their mobile devices while the power was out. And so one of the suggestions from a communications point of view is to make our website more mobile friendly. Certainly any pages that would have information about what we're doing and how we're doing it, making it more mobile friendly so that it's easy to read, because it's, if you're looking on a small screen, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Secondly, I know that we've just launched our, you can sign up for call-out service on certain things in terms of text messaging, but folks also suggested, while they recognize we have a corporate Facebook account and a corporate Twitter account, it may be something that we want to work with our partner agencies on and have either Emergency Kitchener Twitter account that Hydro and us and the region could use and post messages on, and people just look at that, because, you know, I guess our Twitter account gets set up with automated messaging around special events and stuff like that. So in the, you know, in the middle of the storm stuff that our staff was sending out, there was also tweets coming out about different events and so on, and some people thought that that was just sort of adding to noise when they were just concerned about what was happening. Thirdly, I think a little bit us, but certainly much more Hydro need to make a better use of technology. So on our end, I know our contact center was fantastic in dealing with, but one of the things we may want to consider doing is being able to record ACR messages, so that instead of the normal advertising that plays while people are waiting, that we actually put update messages with updates on what's happening, and then people can either hang up or wait to actually talk to an agent if they have something to report. And in Hydro, really, I mean, we've got an awesome hydro utility on a whole pile of fronts, but quite frankly, on their use of communications technology, we need to get to the 21st century, and whether it's the ACR or using social media and so on, they really need to be urged on. So I look to our reps on the board to help encourage that. Thank you.
Mrs. Johnson has a response to your
Yes,
some of
thank
your
you.
questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, we have identified those very issues that you've brought to the table, and in fact, looking at an emergency Twitter account is something that we would be prepared to do. I caution, though, that our city account has already over 10,000 followers, and some of the reaches from the activity on the first weekend alone was further than 30,000 people were talking about it. So to start a new account, we certainly wouldn't have those numbers right away, but it's worth looking into.
And the last point that I just wanted to raise was it may be worthwhile, because often when Hydro goes out, telephone service can still work as long as you have old-style telephones. And so I think it would be very helpful to ensure that council and the key members of our emergency group in the city have access at their homes to an old-style telephone that just plugs in still, and that, like, plugs in to a telephone jack, assuming they're not on Rogers, but are still using like an old traditional Bell kind of phone, and are still accessible that way, because that would also, just one little thing that I noticed on that front.
Thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Just following on Councillor Urbanish's comments about communications, I found the first 18 hours into about noon hour of the following day, absolutely no communication, and I did get some inquiries as to what's happening, and I really couldn't pass on anything. In fact, I tried to call the communications center, and all I got is a busy line, couldn't leave a message or anything, and then waited and waited and waited, and just got frustrated and hung up. And I know they were busy because everybody else was trying to call in, and I can appreciate them being probably overloaded. I just didn't know how many people were working in that particular storm at the center. It was just one person trying to answer all the phones, or could they have had maybe 2 or 3 people come in to handle that first 24-hour problem? I don't know. Maybe the staff can comment on that, basically. I noticed in the storm costs, there's $400,000 noted here in the report that is approximately the impact of this particular storm, and yet the the paragraph after that talks about having spent $50,000 to $100,000 in overtime and equipment rental. What happened to the other $300,000? Like, where did that go? I can understand staff working on the weekend, first 48 hours, trying to, as quickly as possible, get everybody out there who they can to work the overtime, but was that all done in one weekend, or where's the rest of the money gone to, the $300,000?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the $300,000, the total $400,000 is what we estimated the cost for the 4 weeks from the storm on the 19th till we get it all cleaned up. There is the $50,000 to $100,000, which we refer to as the unfunded, where the overtime, the rental equipment that would be put in that time. There's still the odd nights where staff are staying late to deal with hangers they're finding in trees still from a safety perspective. And that's where, and then we still have some of the brush that we're going to have to get rid of once everything has been collected. And we have it piled at Battler and at the Kitchener Operations Facility. The other $300,000 is really how we adjusted the staffing. As already answered one of the questions, you know, we've pulled the forestry staff off street raising, structural pruning. Other operations groups have pitched in. Therefore, crack sealing isn't happening. There's some catch bracing repairs that we could pause at this point. So really, those accounts or those budgets aren't being charged. So ultimately, all we've done is adjusted the staffing. So those particular activities will be not spent to the same degree they would have been at this point, because we focused our attention on the debris cleanup. So the forestry account, or the actual work order account for this storm, will show close to that $400,000 number we're anticipating at the end of this week. But we'll see the lower money spent in those other activities. So it's still being funded. We still have the staff here. We still have the equipment here. We're just using it and charging it into a different account.
So, okay, I was trying to understand what you're saying there. So basically, the $400,000 is from the forestry account in terms of the cleanup, whereby the other segments of operations, whether it's sewer maintenance, gardening, their costs will be lower, and the money sort of got reshuffled. Is that what your explanation is?
Basically, yes. That's the answer. Yes.
So really, the storm didn't cost us $400,000. It only cost us about $50,000 to $100,000.
That's correct.
Okay, well, that's what I'm just trying to understand. And so I did talk to, during the storm, I went out because constituents were calling me, and I was talking with them. And in my area, up in the west and Avondale area, there was city staff working, and I happened to talk to a couple of the crew people, and they were from gardening. And I mean, it was great that they were there helping out and doing whatever they had. So I was just wondering how this all got blended together. Okay, that's it. Those are the 2 points that I wanted to touch base on. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, because Councillor Gazzola and I were having a little discussion here. I apologize for if we interrupted that. The storm did not cost us $400,000. We're going to spend $400,000. It's a difference in terminology, and I know that may be semantics, but it's how it's accounted for. We're allocating $400,000 to the storm, of which $50,000 to $100,000 is money that we don't have. $300,000 has been moved from other accounts in order to pay for the storm. So it's a spend versus a cost.
Okay. Thank you for that. Can we be as quickly as possible? We are 10 minutes till 5:30, and we're running quite a bit behind, and we have a few more council members that want to have some questions, so please be, and we also have to go back into caucus, so make it quick, please. Councillor Gazzola.
That was for me.
Yes.
I'll be very
No,
quick.
it's for
Most of my questions have been answered. And let's face it, the cost to our society was $400,000 or whatever. I would like to know, when you're all done, what the cost was. How many hours did it take to clean it up and do that? And you have person costs and equipment. So what I'm hearing, and I'm glad to hear, that what we haven't accounted for and I'd like to know, could you come a little closer than 50 to 100? What is it? I'll leave it at that, but I would like to see within the next period of time a full report on what the costs were. Because what has happened is you're able to cope with these costs because you're able to do other work or put off other work until a later time. There are other things that you'd normally be doing that you didn't get done. You're going to have to do them. So the cost was there. I have no problems, and I have no concerns with what happened. I had a lot of big trees in my own property fall down. I know that. I was somewhat annoyed, though, that I was having to find out what was going on in a newspaper. When I pick up the paper to read about a $400,000 cost, that's the first I ever heard of it. And was this information shared with everyone, or was this information, does this information only go out to a limited number of people, or what? I found a number of occasions in the last few weeks where I'm having to read the paper to find out what's going on. Maybe that's just my problem, but I don't know if anybody wants to answer that question, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I can't give you a specific answer, and I think from hearing Councillor Gazzola's question, I would agree that before anything would have gone out, an information email should have gone out to council outlining that anticipated costs in this 4-week endeavor. I think some of our staff were questioned. We had received information from both the City of Waterloo, City of Cambridge, of what they anticipated the cost of the storm to be in those municipalities. And the question came to our staff, who responded accordingly. And we should have certainly let council know first before anything went out. And again, for nothing more than to clarify this total 400 versus overtime costs to get a clear picture before anything had gotten out to the public.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. I will combine my comments with just a couple of questions here. In terms of the kind of trees, did we see any pattern in terms of the ones that fell? Soft trees, maples versus other hard trees, did we notice that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. It was every type of species, from the big lilacs or the big telpas in Victoria Park to maples to ashes, depending on the location and the wind velocity in those areas.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say that I think that we can do a few things better. I think that our call center did an admirable job. However, I think that Councillor Yunetsky is right. We might have wanted to upstaff that if it's possible. I'm assuming it is. Also, that they could have gotten more updates from our friends at Hydro, as Council could have, more specifically about the kind of streets that were being impacted. Council was being asked questions about what was going on, and I think we had to push to find out what was going on and when. And I think that would be helpful for call center, for our website to update, and for council to have on a regular updated basis. Every 2 hours, I think, is reasonable. These people are working anyways, and they did a great job, but I think that they need to share that information with us. In terms of the call loop that came through from a suggestion from a resident in my neighborhood, and I think that's a great idea. I think that I don't know whether the city could do something like that as well, but I certainly think that Hydro should. And in terms of the trees, I did notice, and I've had comments that the older trees that were in certain neighborhoods, mine and Ward 9, perhaps we could look at a proactive way to see if the lifespan of the trees is an issue, because there's a lot of trees that fell and that they're nearing the end of their life, and once we get past this constraint of all the backlog, we might want to look at triaging which trees might want to we should come down, because there's a lot of trees that have heavy limbs in older neighborhoods that potentially could crash into homes, etc. So all in all, I'm pleased that the firefighters and the city collaborated really well together and pitched in and helped with the cleanup. I think it was an overall very good job.
Okay. Care to respond?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think there are a lot of great points. I think with regards to looking at the older trees, we have on road reconstruction, we have a piece of equipment that really does use an ultrasound to deal with the density of the trees and the quality of the trees. The difficulty is using that one piece of equipment on, all the street trees, especially in the older areas. And even then, it can be a hit and miss. There's one on Aaron Street. The branch came down, and you found when the branch came down, one side of it is definitely hollow in the middle. Doesn't necessarily mean the other stem going up isn't. We still are going back to remove that tree. So it's certainly something that we are looking at. And since we do have the piece of equipment, it's certainly something as we go out over and above street reconstructions to make certain those trees are good quality.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Just a couple. I did ask, and I was curious that since this was a storm that impacted the more than just Kitchener, it impacted Waterloo and Cambridge, why it wasn't elevated to a police emergency response, I suppose. I think that I understand now through my conversation with Mr. Chapman that it was fire that was sort of the first responders. But I think that maybe we could look at, certainly police has a better communication way of getting the message out to everybody, and maybe that's where it should have gone. I don't know, just a thought. The other thing that I was a little bit unclear about was the whole protocol between the acting mayor and who was it, because when I got messages, and Mr. Chapman clarified for me that it wasn't that I didn't get an email or none of us got contacted, it was that some communication was not able to get to the acting mayor, who was Councillor Graham, because of his phone, but it didn't follow the regular protocol. So whoever should have been next, and I'm not so I think we need to understand how that, if that protocol is in place, that needs to be followed appropriately. Certainly, it was wonderful that Councillor Hrabanovich was around and he was able to step in, but we all need to learn how to deal with these emergency situations. I think it's a good learning, a terrible situation to learn in, but we all need to learn about that. The other question I had, sorry about that. No, I believe it's done. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yes, I would, considering what's happened and taking into consideration Councillor Hrbanovich's comments around hydro, which I assure you we will take up with hydro. As far as the City of Kitchener is concerned, I would ask that staff research the historical intensity and frequency of these summer storms and their cost, and in that they consider consolidating a potential storm budget with our existing winter storm budget, and to see if the financing is appropriate at this time. And to return with that, I'm not really terribly concerned about the timing at this point. And if I could just speak to it quickly as well, I also wanted to be very clear that given the circumstances, I think our staff responded very quickly. I know specifically in my ward, which if you look at the map here, there's dots all over it in terms of the impacts. And in particular in Kiwanis Park, for example, everyone from the forest staff to the lifeguards at the pool, they all pulled together to get everything back in order as quickly as possible. And I'd like to commend our staff for that. So that's the motion I'd like to put forward. Thank you.
Do we have any comments? Councillor Hrabanovich.
Sorry, there was one other question I forgot to ask. In Woodland Cemetery, I know that we knocked the trees, the trees knocked over a number of headstones and so on. is that handled through the perpetual care fund or whatever, or how are we dealing with those? And if you don't have an answer, you can get back to me. Okay, just want to make sure that it's getting addressed.
Any questions on the recommendation? So, well, okay. You want, Kelly?
So I wanted to make sure I understood your recommendation. You have been asking for a report on climate change, how we're dealing with coming up with responses for
Right.
future
First of all,
storms.
to identify if this is a one-off event, I guess two off events. And if not, if it is an indicator of future unanticipated costs in the summer, should we be consolidating that with our winter storm budget, which also identifies those sort of one-time events, because there might be some economy of scale there. So, yes, that's essentially the motion.
Oh, okay. I guess I was wondering if you had put in here, because I heard some conversation about a report or a list broken down about how the departments, the costs came through in the departments. Did I hear that, or was I imagining that? That was, John had asked for. Okay, thanks. No, I just wanted to know. Great, thanks.
Okay, the vote will be called. So all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Just one little quick item before there's some unfinished business that Councillor Singh wanted to bring forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know for the interest of time, I will kind of defer to it, but I thought I'd quickly speak of it as the appropriate staff are here, Mr. Hummel and Mr. Whitmer. I'll allow Mr. Gazzola to finish his conversation. Okay, all right. It's to do with the bathroom facilities issues at McLennan Park. It not being necessarily just a ward-specific problem, McLennan Park being a citywide park. This is a concern that was, or some questions that had been relayed to me by my fellow councillors as well. I wanted to, as I said, for the interest of time, I don't think we can dwell into full depth of the issues that are with the facilities there right now, but a more thorough follow-up would be helpful for myself and the rest of council.
Sure.
Okay. And this concludes community infrastructures. Mayor Zaire.
Okay, I've discussed with the staff. I know that we are now 1/2 hour behind, and that's okay, not bad considering the day, but we had counted on a 1/2 hour break here at this point in time. So I would suggest, notwithstanding the fact that there probably are some planning staff people here, that we take that break and we go back into the caucus room and deal with that one other item, and then come back out here as quickly as we can.
Okay.